Okay. Now we should see those participant numbers start to go up. There we go. Folks are joining. For those of you who are just signing in, welcome to the Community Energy Resilience Policy Summit. We will start right at 9 o'clock. So make yourselves comfortable and get ready for some incredible information and speakers. We will start in 2 minutes. So we're very excited. We've got a big crowd expected here. And thank you all for joining us. For those who are just joining, we do recommend setting your Zoom to speaker view in the upper right corner of your Zoom screen so that you will see the speaker. We have a lot of panelists who are logged in right now, and you really want to focus on the person who is speaking. So speaker view is better than gallery view. We do recommend you click on speaker view. I'll be talking about that more in a moment. We'll start in 1 minute. So thanks again, everybody, for joining us, and all our fantastic speakers, panelists, our keynote, Carmen Ramirez. Everybody's here waiting to share their experiences with you. So thanks again. I'm happy to see so many people are interested in this topic, which of course is of importance to all of us. We hope everybody's doing okay during the pandemic. Stay healthy out there. What a time we're living in. All right. Happy to see so many people hopping on as we count down to 9 o'clock. Hello, everybody. My name is Duran Amaran. I'm Program Manager of the Climate Center here in Sonoma County, and welcome to our Community Energy Resilience Policy Summit. We have an incredible lineup of community leaders, environmental justice advocates, policymakers, and representatives of workers and labor who've all gathered here, virtually of course, to share their experiences and perspectives. We're all working together to create a climate-safe California that is clean, affordable, resilient, equitable, and safe. We'd like to invite you to review the Climate Center's plan to do just that and join a growing coalition of elected officials, business owners, and others by endorsing our plan. And we're going to drop the link into the chat right now. But before we begin, a couple of housekeeping notes. First, as I mentioned a moment ago, please put your Zoom screen on speaker view to get the best experience and avoid what we call the Brady Bunch effect. Second, please direct your questions through the Q&A feature, and we'll field as many of them as we can at the end of each panel. So again, your questions should go into Q&A, and we'll handle them at the end of each panel. Speaking of our panels, let's quickly review our agenda and then thank our sponsors and partners. First, for our agenda, and I won't mention all the speakers because you'll be meeting them at the beginning of each panel, but let's go over the timing. After this welcome, we're going to introduce our CEO, Ellie Cohen, who's going to do a little bit of context setting. Watch a short video on equity and resilience. And then we're going to have our keynote from Carmen Ramirez, the Mayor Pro Tem of Oxnard. At 9:25 is our policy update panel, moderated by Vice Chair of the California Energy Commission, Janea Scott. And then we'll have a short break at 10:10. We'll be back at 10:13 with our labor panel, moderated by Mark Kyle, followed immediately by our environmental justice panel at 10:40. At 11:20, we'll have another short break. And we'll have our community choice energy panel at 11:23, and we will close at noon on the dot, we hope. So thank you, those of you who are mentioning some of the issues that you're seeing. We'll do our best to resolve those. Let's quickly take a look at our sponsors and thank those, because without them, this would not be possible. Our sponsors are all working hard every day to make a clean energy future here in California. TerraVerde Energy, Marin Clean Energy, Calpine, Bloom Energy, Sonoma Clean Power, Blue Planet Energy, Monterey Bay Community Power, Reimagine Power, Simplify, and River City Bank. Thanks to all of you for your support, and also our promotional partners, many of whom spread the word and are the reason some of you are here. Our partners include Joint Venture Silicon Valley, Clean Coalition, the Center for Sustainable Energy, the Local Government Commission, the Better World Group, and all of you, the 167 people and counting who joined us here today. We're all allies in this struggle. So now I'd like to introduce our first speaker, the CEO of the Climate Center, Ellie Cohen. Ellie, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Here you go. Welcome, everybody. So glad to have you here. And thanks again to our sponsors, to our partners, to all our presenters, and to our staff who made today possible. For those of you new to the Climate Center, we are really proud to have a mission of speed and scale greenhouse gas reductions. We played a key role in growing the community choice energy, or CCAs. There are now 21 CCAs serving 11 million Californians, or a quarter of the state, with 88% clean energy. That's compared to just 2 5 years ago. A great example of our mission. Climate change is real, it's happening, it's accelerating and worsening. One of the most important scientific pieces of evidence is that 9 of 15 global tipping points have already been activated. Fortunately, we still have time to prevent an uninhabitable hothouse climate, but we have to act soon. United Nations scientists have conservatively recommended that we cut emissions in half globally by 2030 and begin now to draw down emissions we've already dumped into the atmosphere. Fortunately for us in California, we've been leaders in climate change and climate action, but we have a lot more that we need to do. And in order for the world to get where it needs to be and for our country to get where it needs to be, we have decided to build on the efforts we have done with CCAs in California and launch a new campaign, a collaborative campaign working across the entire state called Climate Safe California. Our goal is to accelerate existing state policy timelines to achieve by 2030 80% below 1990 greenhouse gas levels, net negative emissions, which means starting drawdown so sequestration is greater than emissions, and securing resilient communities for everyone. 2 key principles for us in achieving this work are, number 1, we must ensure a just transition for workers. That means supporting the workers who are dependent now on fossil fuel enterprises as they are phased out. It means continuing to create jobs for building and construction and other trades as we solve climate change together. And the second critical principle is to close the climate gap. We must ensure that lower income communities and communities of color are no longer disproportionately harmed by very toxic fossil fuel development, production, and use. We know that climate justice is racial justice. A key program in our Climate Safe California effort is community energy resilience. And instead of perpetuating a 100-year-old grid architecture that has caused devastating wildfires and power shutoffs, we want to build a new decentralized and integrated grid that is clean, affordable, resilient, equitable, and safe. We invite you to join our Community Energy Resilience Policy Coalition, urging the state to emphasize local, community-centric clean energy resilience planning, prioritizing lower income communities. And we also invite you today to endorse Climate Safe California. Just go to climatesafeca.org. You can do it during one of our breaks today. It's a public pledge of support for California to accelerate aggressive, equitable climate policy. And we know California inspires states and the world to greater action on climate change. So I challenge you today. We would like to get at least 30 new endorsements this morning. We'll report on this later in our program, but please go to climatesafeca.org and endorse Climate Safe California. Finally, I want to reaffirm the Climate Center's commitment to ending systemic racism in the policies and programs that we develop here in California to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. As we speak today, there is a vote on AB 345, which establishes a health and safety buffer zone to protect communities, people from their homes and schools and healthcare facilities from toxic fuel drilling. We need to put that into motion, and it will be a very simple step, but a very important one to move in the right direction to protect the health of all Californians and to move away from fossil fuels. Also, earlier this week, Assembly Member Jim Cooper sent a letter to environmental organizations pointing out how low-income households spend more of their monthly income on utility costs and how policies designed to achieve environmental goals have exacerbated inequality. It's time to turn that around. I'm going to hand this off now to Amanda, and as you'll see in the following video, we need to learn from our failures in past programs from the state as we work to develop new, equitable state clean energy resilience programs going forward.
I'm Rick Tice, a volunteer research librarian for the Climate Center, and I produced this presentation on equity and energy. The killing of George Floyd focused attention on racial inequity like never before. This inequity is evident everywhere, even in California's energy policies. There cannot be climate justice without racial justice. Many communities of color and lower income communities are disproportionately impacted by pollution from fossil fuels due to zoning, redlining, and redistricting. Now they are also being impacted by public safety power shutoffs. John Howat, an economic analyst at the National Consumer Law Center in Boston, found that African Americans earning less than 150% of the poverty level were about twice as likely to have their electricity shut off as white households with comparable incomes. Compared to white households, they also have higher frequencies of disconnections, disconnection notices, and households foregoing other necessities to pay for energy. We know poor people already pay a disproportionately greater share of their income for energy needs, yet as electricity utility ratepayers, they are also contributing to clean energy financial incentives that go to wealthy people. California leads the way nationally on solar, with more rooftop solar on homes than any other state, thanks to far-sighted state leadership and grant and incentive programs administered by the California Public Utilities Commission and the California Energy Commission. But there is a dark side to California's clean energy story. A number of studies have highlighted inequities created by incentives. Perhaps the most striking findings come from Eric Fournier at UCLA's Institute of the Environment and Sustainability, with a report showing how inequities in incentives place a larger burden of cost on the least affluent and reward wealthier customers. In the study, it analyzed the adoption of electric vehicles, plug-in hybrids, and residential rooftop solar in Los Angeles County. In these maps, the areas outlined in red are disadvantaged communities. Light areas have the least level of adoption, the darkest have the highest. The results show how public policies designed to reduce greenhouse gas emissions in California have resulted in a skewed distribution of benefits toward those who typically use the most energy and who have higher incomes. The study said that incentives designed to ensure equality of access and opportunity have not been successful because lower-income community members face more challenges in their ability to take advantage of clean energy incentive programs. The UCLA study noted that incentive programs offer more generous payments to applicants that meet low-income requirements, but notwithstanding higher incentives, these programs were consistently underutilized by lower-income communities due to financial barriers, limited awareness of programs, and lower rates of property ownership required in some programs. Since 2006, the Single-Family Affordable Solar Housing Program has supported installation of over 8,000 systems with a total capacity of 26 megawatts. The Multifamily Affordable Solar Housing Program has completed 480 projects, totaling 42 megawatts. According to the recent UCLA study, the results are disappointing. The California Public Utilities Commission Self-Generation Incentive Program released a report in March this year which reviewed SGIP's program performance through 2018. It reported analysis of the demographic responses by the host customers paints a picture of SCHIP residential storage respondents as older, highly educated, high-income households who own single-family homes and tend to classify themselves as early adopters. They live in suburban neighborhoods and are more likely than solar non-storage participants to report that their home was in an area they classified as having a high risk of wildfires. While past programs may not have gone as far as environmental justice advocates had hoped, their work over the decades has been critical and continues to result in major changes to provide more equity for lower-income communities. Recognizing California can do better, the push by environmental justice advocates has resulted in new programs to address putting renewable energy and storage into low-income communities. The nonprofit Grid Alternatives has been selected by the California PUC as the administrator of the Disadvantaged Communities Single-Family Solar Homes Program to replace SASH. This California state program provides $8.5 million in incentives annually to help homeowners in disadvantaged communities go solar. The quest for environmental justice has also created solar on multifamily affordable housing to replace MASH. And the SCHIP program has also been recently revised to specifically address energy equity and resiliency, a great step in the right direction, with new incentives that became available in May. It will be interesting to see how much money actually goes to low-income people and communities, as opposed to higher-income homeowners who can qualify for higher incentives based on having experienced 2 or more power shutoffs or living in a high fire threat district. As we seek to develop new policy and programs to create a cleaner and now also more resilient electricity system, we need to prioritize supporting California's communities of color and lower income communities and fund these programs from sources other than low and middle income rate payers. Now is the time to end the systemic racism that has for too long driven inequities in California's clean energy policies and programs.
Well, thank you, Rick, for that excellent summary, and thank you, Ellie, for your presentation. I'm going to introduce our keynote speaker in a moment. I'd like to point out that since we have so much to cover, we're offering only very brief introductions, but if you want to learn more about our incredible speakers and panelists, we're dropping their bios directly into the chat. So for example, here is the amazing Mayor Pro Tem of Oxnard, Carmen Ramirez. Carmen, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Can you see me? Can you hear me? Oops, there we go. Hi, good morning. Hi. What a fantastic opportunity to speak to people from all over California and beyond about the experience of Oxnard that I've had the privilege to be involved in for quite some time. Good morning. What a time we're living through, but as many people say, this is a time where we can try to take advantage of any opportunities that this pandemic, economic crisis, and social justice movement provide. I am an attorney. I've been a legal aid attorney most of my life. My life has been focused on, my career has been focused on providing legal representation to underrepresented people, farm workers, Spanish-speaking people, disabled people. I continue to do that, even as now I serve as Mayor Pro Tem for the city of Oxnard, which if you've had any strawberries lately, unless they're from the Salinas area, they may be from Oxnard. And this is where our wonderful produce comes from. And unfortunately, people who provide that produce, I always like to say we've never had a day when we haven't gone to our local grocery stores or markets, even during this time of economic devastation, that we haven't found full produce, at least around here. And somebody's picking it and somebody's sacrificing and even endangering their lives. So that's been my focus. But then at some point, I realized that there were some systemic problems that were creating health issues and economic disadvantage for low-income people. And I got very involved a few years ago when a very large mining company, excuse me, wanted to create a liquefied natural gas terminal here in Oxnard. And it looked like the skids were greased and was gonna happen. And this is a headline from the LA Times from a few years ago talking about what Oxnard has been trying to do. Oxnard is a low-income community, working people, though we do have a lot of wealthy folks who live at our wonderful beaches, but we've been trying to get our beach back. We have a Superfund site on Ormond Beach, which is on the Pacific Flyway for birds, great potential economic opportunity for tourism and nature and science. But we've got these power plants there, gas-fired power plants that have been there for 50 plus years. So when the State Water Board said no more once through cooling, our city, the community of our city said, we don't think so. We don't want to have this here. Let's try something new. We tried to fight it, and we engaged in a long study. And this is the moment when I'm going to thank Vice Chair of the Energy Commission, Janea Scott, who you'll hear from later, for her fantastic decision against the power plant proposal. I have it right here, the power plant decision from October 5th, 2017, where the Energy Commission commissioners, that was not just Ms. Scott, but also Karen Douglas, after listening to hours and hours and days of testimony and from our lawyers and from community groups and the Environmental Defense Center, Center for Biological Diversity, the Sierra Club, CAUSE, Central Coast Alliance, United for a Sustainable Economy, to say why we thought together there were other options for our beach, for our community, for clean energy. And we did win that day after much struggle and expense. But why did we do that? Because we said here in Oxnard, yes, we're Spanish speakers, we're poor, a lot of us are working, but still hard time paying the rent, not great opportunities. We're not gonna have it. And the next slide, I hope that comes up, is what the community did when we had the fight against the NRG. We did go to the PUC, and if we could have that slide come up, which is this one. I'm not able to do it. Oops, did you lose me? Hope not.
We can hear you fine.
Okay, I hit a button, I shouldn't have done it. But at any rate, we just said no, organized a lot of people, we came forward, it happened. And then what was going to be the alternative? We said, we think we were very lucky. We had some great experts who came forward and said there are opportunities for resilient, renewable energy that would replace the natural gas facility that was proposed by NRG. You know, and in fact, that's what we have now, to replace the power plant proposal on our beach that didn't need to be there because did not need seawater. We have a proposed project that has now gone through all the permitting, just waiting to break ground, called Ventura Clean Energy, that's going to be in Oxnard, providing great jobs, project labor agreements, union labor, community benefits, and it's going to be 100 megawatts of power to replace that old rusty Hulk you see. I don't know if we can advance a slide to show our community group at the PUC, but it's not coming up, but that's okay. But I do want to talk about something that is very important to me. I'll just read something from Richard Trumka, who is the president of the AFL-CIO. Our focus today is energy resilience. We know that people are very worried about their jobs in the current energy industry, which are providing great salaries for them, but it is an industry that is seeing the end of the line. And we leaders have to find a way to let people know there's another option. At the same time, we can't leave people behind who cannot transition. I always like to quote Trumka, because I did go to that Global Action Summit in San Francisco a couple of years ago, and he is a former coal miner. And I know some of the other speakers are going to talk about him, but he just said, if you leave the workers behind and the people can't transition, who are at that stage of life where they're not going to be able to get into a new industry, we're going to fail. And I've really, really taken that to heart. In all of my efforts, I want to focus on apprenticeships, training, and that's what has led our city to be involved in the Clean Power Alliance, another community choice energy program, which it is accountable to the people. We are 32 entities, cities and 2 counties, Ventura and LA County, providing, generating, developing clean energy. We have a ways to go, but we think we're going to meet our California goals ahead of time. This is such a fantastic opportunity. We have proven that you just don't have to accept what somebody's telling you. I know they laughed at us when we said we couldn't fight the BHP proposal, and that's up on the screen. We did something that hadn't been done before. 2,000 people at a state lands commission hearing here in Oxnard that said no, and I want to thank those 2 gentlemen of the 3 that turned that down, and that was how Oxnard got started. You know, it was John Chung, who was state treasurer at the time, and John Garamendi, who was lieutenant governor, who were the 2 votes against that project. And that encouraged our low-income community, Spanish-speaking community, people who felt marginalized, to say, yes, we can fight this. So I want to just recognize, for example, the Sierra Club, which has recently told us, recognize their own history of racial discrimination in the past. Sierra Club's been very great to Oxnard and what they've helped us fight against the VHP program and now against the Puente program. So we've had great partners, and that's included so many people they're not able to mention. A few years ago, I met Anne Hancock, the earlier director of the Climate Center, who started us on the path to Clean Power Alliance. And here we are, it's fantastic. So I just want to close by saying, in the words of really Dolores Huerta, sí se puede. Yes, we can do this. We just have to get organized. We have to listen to each other. We have to be empathetic with those who are afraid, but we've got to do this, because if we don't, we are endangering every living thing on the planet. And that's what motivates me. Thank you for this opportunity. I am thrilled to be here in great company. Thank you. Sí se puede. Yes, we can.
Sí se puede. Thank you so much, Carmen. Gracias for everything you do and for what you shared with us today. And thank you for rolling with the little technical difficulties we had with the slides. We seem to have fixed that. So thank you for that. We're going to move directly to our policy update panel. Our first panel is focused on policy. To lead it, I'm very proud to introduce Vice Chair of the California Energy Commission, Janea Scott. Janea, the floor is yours. And we're just waiting for Janea.
Oops, there we go.
There you go.
Can you see and hear me now?
Yes.
Okay. I was thinking, I can't see my picture in the corner there. Well, good morning, and thank you, Doron, and to the Climate Center for inviting me to be here to speak. I'm just delighted. As Doron mentioned, I'm Janea Scott, the Vice Chair of the California Energy Commission. And I will be a presenter and a moderator here today. for our morning panel on current clean energy resilience efforts at a state level, including our low-income and disadvantaged communities. So for our panel today, we'll start with me, and I'm going to present some of what the Energy Commission is doing with regards to clean energy resilience. Then we will hear from California Public Utilities Commissioner Genevieve Shiroma. After Commissioner Shiroma, we'll hear from Eric Lamoureux from our California Governor's Office of Emergency Services. Then we'll hear a pre-recorded remarks from Senator Henry Stern. And finally, we'll finish up with some Q&A, and Mayor Pro Tem Ramirez will join us for that. So let's see if we can get my slides to come up, please.
We're just working on getting those for you at full screen so they'll look good.
All right, thank you so much. So what I want to talk with you about this morning is the Energy Commission's programs and policies that seek to further clean energy resilience across California. So if you would please go to my next slide. I'm going to talk with you about our Electric Program Investment Charge Program, or EPIC. And as you can see here, it was established in 2012 by the California Public Utilities Commission, and it funds research and development and a list of things here that I won't read to you because you all can read, but that help us advance clean energy and the technologies that will help us get to the 100% clean energy standard in California. We invest about $130 million annually to support entrepreneurs, researchers, and innovators to develop new technologies, foster innovation, and help bring clean energy solutions to the marketplace for the benefit of California's residents. If you'll go to the next slide, please. I want to talk about the efforts that we are making to advance energy equity at the Energy Commission. This involves releasing targeted funding solicitations, using equity factors in scoring, and also conducting outreach to underrepresented communities. And as you know, an aging infrastructure and a changing climate threaten the safety and livelihood of California's residents. Wildfires and other natural disasters have highlighted the necessity for new technologies capable of increasing energy efficiency and maintaining power to critical services during electric grid outages. So to address these and other challenges, we are working closely with communities to equip them and businesses and public agencies with breakthrough technology solutions to help us build a safe and resilient energy system. And this map here shows you something that we're very proud of at the Energy Commission. More than 29% of the funds have gone directly to communities that are identified as disadvantaged under Cal EnviroScreen, and also to low-income communities. And we have been working to listen closely to communities, to what they need, what they would like to see in their own community, and then try to tailor some of the solicitations around that. If you'll go to the next slide, please. I want to highlight for you all a little bit of the technologies that we've been working on. So the first one here that I'm going to highlight for you is microgrid technology. And the Energy Commission has invested in about 19 microgrids around our state. Microgrids have the ability to provide islands of electricity when surrounding areas do not have electricity access. And in 2015, the Energy Commission began a targeted effort to advance microgrid technology to the commercial stage. So one of these microgrids is the Blue Lake Rancheria, is in the Blue Lake Rancheria tribal land up in Humboldt County. Since going online in 2017, this microgrid has been a critical lifeline for the community, keeping power supplied to Central Command Center for Firefighting Operations during a wildfire in 2017, and also providing power for over 10,000 people during a day-long public safety power shutoff event in 2019. So this is just one example of microgrid technology around our state. If you would kindly go to the next slide, I will talk a little bit about the advancement that we're funding for advancing and deploying energy storage. And one of the things we want to do is make sure that our tribal communities in the state are also included in this clean energy transition. And so what we did was we worked, again, closely with tribes to understand what is it that they need, what types of technology would they be interested in demonstrating. And most recently at our June and July business meetings, we're able to award some energy storage EPIC grants for Native American tribal projects. These projects will demonstrate long duration energy storage technologies. So most current energy storage provides about 4 hours of storage duration, but the projects that you see listed here are designed to provide 10 or more hours of storage duration. Over $7 million in grant funding is going to demonstrate a flow battery that's combined with a flywheel storage technology connected to solar, and that's the first project here with the Rincon Band of Los Sueños Indians. This is a big project designed to provide resiliency and cost savings for, as you can see, a wastewater treatment plant, a gas station and convenience store, one of the office buildings, and the casino and resort, which also serves as emergency operations center and shelter. We have $1.7 million that's going to a project benefiting the Sabobo Band of Los Sueños Indians, and that will demonstrate a flow battery with solar and help provide support to the fire station. This project is designed to validate system performance such as energy storage duration, load shifting, peak shaving, and resiliency during utility power outages. And it will also collect information to support commercial deployment such as capital and operating costs and lessons learned. The EPIC program also approved over $1 million to demonstrate a flywheel storage and the Viejas Band of Kumeyaay Indians. And in conjunction with the Microgrid Technology, this project will provide pumping power for water wells and an uninterrupted power for operation of medical equipment and temperature control for elderly residents. So projects like these help California move new energy storage technology from proposal to marketplace. And we're trying to put this cutting edge technology into key communities that need it the most and are excited to demonstrate it with us. If you'd please go to the next slide, I'll talk about energy efficiency technologies and some of those demonstrations across the state. So we are retrofitting existing buildings to be more energy efficient, and that tends to be challenging, especially in multifamily buildings. So in 2017, the Energy Commission began a targeted effort to scale up energy efficiency retrofits of existing buildings, especially in low-income communities and communities that Cal EnviroScreen denotes as disadvantaged. So we had a project with Rocky Mountain Institute, and the resulting grant was for a project to develop and demonstrate prefabricated building envelope panels optimized for common multifamily building type in California. And basically, this just means that it makes the buildings stronger, so that if you've got your heat on, the heat stays in the building. If you have your air conditioning on, your air conditioning stays inside the building, so that you're not losing so much of the inside conditioned air out into the outside. We are also working with Franklin Energy Services, and we made an EPIC grant there for evaluation of energy savings and other benefits for installing breakthrough all-electric water heating and space conditioning systems as a mean of achieving zero net energy in a cost-effective manner. So through these and other projects, the Energy Commission is looking at energy efficient options, not just of new construction, but also in the state's existing buildings. So if you'll go to my last slide, that's just my thank you slide. I'm, again, really happy to be here and have a chance to speak with you all and be part of this excellent panel. And so next, I am going to queue up my friend and colleague from the California Public Utilities Commission, Commissioner Genevieve Shiroma. So Commissioner Shiroma, please take it away.
Thank you, Vice Chair Scott, and thank you to the Climate Center for hosting this event, for including me today. I enjoyed the previous presentations and am very inspired and struck with the fact that the California Public Utilities Commission has a lot more to do. I spent 20 years as elected on our local Sacramento Municipal Utility District Board, and many of the items, social justice, low income, equity, are things that at a local level we grappled with every day. And I'm hoping that experience is helping me at the CPUC. And I want to share with you today a number of things that we are doing to provide for energy resiliency, as a very important issue for communities across California, for low income and disadvantaged communities, which do indeed suffer more disproportionately. They are more impacted by energy disruptions, air pollution, industrial settings, and I'm going to be highlighting a couple of things for us today. So we can go to slide 2. I'll start with just a high-level overview of some efforts. I'll briefly review our microgrids proceeding and the nexus between microgrids and resiliency in disadvantaged and low-income communities. After that, I'll also talk about the self-generation incentive program that was alluded to earlier. It's the no-cost battery program for low-income customers and others. And I'll end by noting one of the other Commission's resiliency efforts, that having to do with telecommunications. All right, next slide. The Commission has a long history of accessibility and affordability programs, the low-income discount programs for bills for electricity and gas. In more recent years, we've had a more explicit focus on the equity dimensions of our work. This slide shows some of those efforts. In 2018, we adopted the definition for disadvantaged communities. This helps us better identify and operationalize equity considerations across the Commission's program areas. And we are keenly aware that the definition, as originally developed, has an air pollution attribute to it, as it must. While we know that there are low-income communities across California that don't necessarily have an air pollution impact. As Vice Chair Scott, I believe you indicated that the CPUC and the Energy Commission formed a Disadvantaged Communities Advisory Group, and through this advisory group, organizations in low-income communities can directly shape programs that affect low-income communities, ranging from renewable energy to research and development to transportation electrification. Now, in addition, the Commission internally has its own environmental social justice plan, and our team has presented to the Commission the various discrete action items that span pilot programs and proceedings, services through proceedings, the policies that we consider and adopt to curb environmental impacts, and to provide more opportunities to meaningfully participate in Commission decision-making, which after a year and a half on the Commission, it is quite phenomenal, because there is a very adjudicatory process, very heavily laden with legal requirements, deadlines, dockets, and so forth. And it can be very hard to navigate. And what we're doing with some of these pilot programs is to overlay our environmental social justice principles, to weave those into our proceedings, and to look towards having those principles apply to all of our proceedings, whether they're general rate cases or what have you. The ultimate goal is to ensure that our California energy transition provides benefits to low-income communities, provides for that equity, keeping energy affordable, and having innovations accessible. Now, 2 other programs that are highlighted on this slide, our recently voted out green tariff program, which is intended to bring renewable energy projects into disadvantaged communities, and also automatically lowering rates for low-income customers. We also have an upcoming proposed climate adaptation ruling. It proposes to establish a framework for engaging vulnerable communities, disadvantaged communities, low-income communities in utility adaptation planning. Next slide. Now, moving on to microgrids, we are in the midst of our microgrid proceeding, which focuses on addressing the key factors required to successfully commercialize microgrids across the state and accelerating the near-term resiliency benefits of microgrids. In June, we wrapped up our track 1 of the proceeding, which focused on near-term deployment. We added on a feature of resiliency towards mitigating the impact of power shutoffs from the public safety power shutoff events. Those public safety power shutoffs are focused on the high fire zones to prevent fires caused by the investor-owned utilities. And we know that there are low-income communities of color that have been heavily impacted by those events. I want to highlight too that the CPUC mandated through Track 1 an increased engagement between the investor-owned utilities, local governments, and tribal governments on microgrid energy resiliency. Those requirements have been added to other decisions as well. And it is through this increased engagement towards working with the investor-owned utilities that the CCAs through the local governments will have access to dedicated teams at the utilities for planning and a data portal that will make grid operations and applications easier to navigate, provide transparency for the stakeholders. And these activities should be fully ready for the, pardon me, the fall high fire season. Now, while our microgrid decision does affect all communities, I believe, and our commission believes, disadvantaged communities, low-income communities can especially benefit from the additional support mandated by the commission as there are plans for the future. And our next slide, this slide highlights ongoing Track 2 actions and proposals. The Microgrid's Track 2 proceeding prioritizes communities with higher proportions of low-income residents, access and functional needs residents, and electricity dependence. It proposes to enable communities with lower ability to fund development of backup generation to maintain critical community services during grid outages. The broader commercialization of microgrids can benefit these communities by making more of these resiliency solutions widespread. And definitely, as a previous speaker said, I think it was Mayor of Pro Tem of Oxnard, that these processes have bureaucracy, that they have many requirements, deadlines, and so forth, can be hard to navigate. It is our goal to simplify that and for that accessibility. Track 2 proposes project criteria to include the proportion of low-income residents as measured by the California Alternative Rates for Energy, CARE, and Family Electric Rate Assistance Program, FARA. These are the low-income discount programs for bills. Also, the top 25% scored using the CalEnviro screen, a 3.0 criteria, the proportion of people with access and functional needs, and the proportion of customers on medical baseline or electricity-dependent Medicare patients, again, all towards, if these microgrids can serve, they are a highly technical tool, but we are looking to highlight and prioritize these communities. In fact, the Commission is holding a workshop as I speak on the Track 2 staff report and proposal. We are also holding an alternatives to diesel workshop on August 25th, and details on both of these are available on our CPUC website. Now, on creating a regulatory environment conducive to microgrids, the Commission can help broaden the set of financially accessible and technically feasible solutions available to communities. Our microgrid proceeding has synergies with other programs, and I mentioned earlier the SCHIP programs. This next slide.
Commissioner Shiroma, you have about 2 or 3 minutes left.
Okay, thank you. So we recently, as alluded to before, we have recently adopted changes. We added $612 million to the resiliency budget for SCHIP for a no-cost battery option to low-income and medically vulnerable customers. We know that there are issues in folks availing themselves of these, and we are looking to work with the investor-owned utilities to provide for that necessary access. All right, slide 7. This shows the dollars addressing the needs of low-income and medically vulnerable customers over the next 5 years. Slide 8. We have seen some pretty tremendous engagement and interest, and we received applications recently and are processing that data towards assuring that we are achieving the efficiencies that we need to achieve. Slide 9. Finally, we know that there is more to do. And one of the other areas where we have authority over safety is telecommunications. And so it is important that you are able to communicate during regular times, during times of needs. And so we recently adopted a decision requiring backup power for the telecommunications companies. And we also have a discount program for phone service as well. I hope this has been helpful to all. We have more to do. We have more to live up to. And I definitely am taking that to heart. Thank you very much. And that ends my presentation. Thank you, Vice Chair Scott.
Thank you so very much, Commissioner Shiroma, for that excellent presentation. We will go on next to Eric Lamoureux, and he is from the Governor's Office of Emergency Services. And Eric, you've got about 10 minutes for your presentation.
I think you're on mute, Eric. Thank you.
All right, thank you everybody for being with us today, and it's a pleasure to represent Cal OES and be part of this important discussion. I wanted to take a few minutes today to talk about the public safety power shutoff program that is being implemented across the state by our investor-owned utilities, and talk about our role at Cal OES and the state's response to these events. So if we could start with the next slide. Cal OES's role in California is to support the consequence management to local governments to deal with the impacts. This is a tool that the public utilities make the determination on when to utilize public safety power shutdown to mitigate the effects of a catastrophic wildfire, to prevent a catastrophic wildfire. Those decisions have significant consequences across the state, as we saw, especially relevant last October 2019, when we experienced a number of these events across the state. But to give you some context on the reasoning behind the utilization of this tool, what you see on the left is the top 20 most deadly fires in California. 5 of those 20 that are listed here were the result of impacts with electric infrastructure. The graph to the right, the 20 most destructive fires over the last 5 years, 8 of the 20 most destructive fires occurred and were the result of impacts with utility infrastructure. So this certainly paints a picture, next slide please, of what has been occurring in California. Obviously, climatologically, we have seen over the last several years the conditions of our fuels, our weather patterns changing and resulting in a much greater spread of catastrophic wildfire. Just back in 2015, I recall being out on a fire, getting briefed by our partners at CAL FIRE. And in that particular time, it was a briefing for the Butte Fire in Calaveras County. And at that particular time, over the last, the prior 2 fire seasons, they had had 3 fires grow by 50,000 acres within a 24-hour period. And those were conditions that nobody on that fire, especially the lifelong fire personnel, had ever seen before. And what we've seen over the last several years is a challenge for fire officials to be able to use their models to replicate some of the fire conditions we've been experiencing. And so the conditions are certainly ripe for significant events on a scale that we haven't seen before. And so the utilities have been utilizing public safety power shut down to a greater extent to work to mitigate those risks. So what you see here on this slide is a representation of the October 2019 events, the maximum population affected. And when the utilities brief on PSPS impacts, they speak to the number of customers impacted. And so what you're seeing here is a number of customers, but generally it's about a 2.5 to 1 customer ratio of the actual number of people affected. And that's what we're working to deal with at Cal OES, is dealing with the consequence management of the impacts to those people. So what we saw in October 2019, and this is across the entire state, all through investor-owned utilities, 940,000 customers impacted. Those are connections across multiple counties. We had to mobilize in partnership with the IOUs nearly 50 generators to be deployed to critical infrastructure across the state, critical facilities. In October, we had a significant wildfire in Sonoma County. We were working to set up shelters in areas that had been de-energized and working in close partnership with PG&E to get generation to those key facilities so that we could bring those online. But between what the utilities provided, both in the way of generation as well as technical expertise, in some cases, to go to a site and help get a legacy generator back in operation. We were also mobilizing generators from the California National Guard and our partners at FEMA. At the same time, we had 1,670 cell towers that were impacted. Many of those sites were operational due to backup generation, but a considerable number of sites did not have that backup generation. And one of the challenges we had was the ability to understand what is the impact from those telecommunication outages. What areas would typically have considerable volume of individuals relying on that communication source, and what is that impact, so that could help to drive some of our resource allocation, getting into areas that were perhaps more remote, more distant from where power was still on, and trying to understand where resources needed to be targeted. At the same time, these PSPS events resulted in 564 schools closing, affecting almost 172,000 individuals. The October event, which obviously has driven a number of requirements from our regulatory partners at the PUC, was quite significant across the state. Real quickly, just to review each of the IOUs, PG&E from October 9th to 11th in early October, de-energized across 38 counties, affecting approximately 1.8 million people. In late October, they executed 3 back-to-back PSPS events in 38 counties. Some of those, for some individuals, they were not able to be re-energized in between events. And so some individuals saw their power out for 5+ days. In Southern California, Edison's service territory, they had outages ranging from 2 days to 8 days for individuals, impacting 181,000 people. And San Diego Gas and Electric had varying outages from hours to up to 8 days, impacting approximately 54,000 individuals. Next slide, please.
And Eric, you have about 2 or 3 minutes left also.
All right. And so these, as I said, the impact to telecommunications, this slide illustrates the outage percentage by area, but a significant impact when individuals lack the ability to understand what the scope is. Sometimes individuals may be without power, but there may be power on 5 to 10 miles away from them. But if they don't have the ability to get online and understand the scope of the particular event and where they can go for services, then they are significantly compromised. Next slide. And so our job here at the State Operations Center, where I'm speaking to you today, we've been activated since early March for COVID, but are significantly involved in the continuing planning and preparation for PSPS. This is where we coordinate the state's response. Notifications come in from all the utilities outlining the outage that's planned to occur, when it occurs, and what their communications have been with their customers. And this is where we work to understand the scope of that event, what those consequences are going to be. Next slide. On the utility side, we're working closely with them to understand their community resource centers. These are critical tools that they implement during events to be able to provide information, sometimes snacks, water if it's hot, blankets if it's cold, but be able to not necessarily be a shelter for individuals, but a place that individuals can go to charge devices and get information on the extent of the outage. At the same time, as I said, we're working actively to prepare with the utilities. They, in turn, are working consistent with their wildfire mitigation plans on vegetative clearance efforts, hardening efforts, sectionalization efforts, all elements that we hope and we are pushing the utilities to ensure will reduce the scope of this year's events. Additionally, working with them to ensure that they're implementing efforts that will allow us to restore power much more quickly. Because when that peak weather event that caused the PSPS passes, we want to shorten the window of time that it takes the utilities to be able to restore that power. Next slide. So as I noted, we're in considerable efforts on a weekly basis at an executive level as well as an operations level, working with the investor-owned utilities to continue to track their progress toward their metrics in being able to reduce scope and reduce the time of events over the course of this year. At the same time, we're working with the CSAC and League of Cities to expand our partnerships with those organizations to use their stakeholder community to help continue to inform and educate and plan around what is expected to occur this year and how we can be as far ahead of the curve in dealing with the consequences of that. Last slide. And then finally, there's been considerable investments from the state in the 19-20 budget, 75 million, 26 of that went to counties, 10 million to cities, all of that funding being utilized for planning efforts, for bringing on generation at critical facilities such as cooling center sites, shelter sites, critical infrastructure such as wastewater treatment plants and freshwater pumping stations. We also have state agencies using 37.5 million to bring portable backup power units online for critical facility, as well as to be better prepared to deal with care and sheltering during a significant event. So that's just a real quick review of our work that is ongoing. Although we're activated 7 days a week dealing with the impacts of the pandemic, we have a team actively involved in continuing to work with our partners at the PUC and CAL FIRE and with the investor-owned utilities to ensure that we stand ready to deal with the inevitable PSPS events that will occur this year, but we certainly hope those are to a smaller scale than we've seen in previous years. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Eric, for another informative presentation. So next, we're going to turn to a pre-recorded video from Senator Henry Stern.
I'm Senator Henry Stern, coming to you, I guess, semi-live over Zoom, here from the heart of my district, the 27th district, which is also the epicenter of fire country here in Southern California. We're also one of the epicenters, though, of clean energy. So I'm delighted to be working with the Climate Center, your incredible team, Kurt, and all your advocates in the Capitol. You've really emerged as a force this year in our public policy making discussions. And we know this has been a long time coming, but this campaign for a climate-safe California is not only crucial, but it's scalable. I think that the goals for a 2030 near-term net negative emissions target is not just something we should be striving for in California, but something that we should really be pushing the next administration. Hopefully there is a next administration, but the next administration to embrace as well. So I'm incredibly honored to get an opportunity to chat with you guys a little bit today about what we've been facing in my district and frankly all over the state of California, a place where keeping the lights on meets our climate goals, where a wildfire is not only exacerbated by our completely unsustainable way of burning fossil fuel, but in fact, the solutions to that wildfire risk and its impact on the power grid requires us to embrace clean energy. We went through devastating wildfires for the last several years here in the district. I actually lost my own place back during Woolsey. And then last fall and winter, in the lead up to my wedding, even the week of, I was evacuated 3 times, had the power shut off twice, had to evacuate my grandmother and try to find a way to get her to medication because her refrigerator wouldn't work and couldn't keep her medicine cool. Things get very real and very personal in a way that I think often is difficult for us to understand with something as ethereal as climate change or power grid or resiliency or these terms we throw around. Very, very real for millions of people now in the state of California. My thesis, and I think the Climate Center's thesis as well in partnering with us on our legislation this year, has been that we can meet these tests without defaulting to diesel or old technologies as something we sort of grasp to and cling to as a safe technology of the past. In fact, it's more risky than ever, especially during wildfires. I remember friends of mine trucking a pickup truck full of red diesel canisters just to get to the urgent care center to get a shot for someone I knew stepped on a nail and needed a tetanus shot. To have to haul canisters of diesel through a wildfire just to refuel a diesel generator that, oh, by the way, contributes to our terrible emissions here in Southern California, seemed to me wrong-headed. So we've really been trying to push the envelope and see if we can embrace what are now very cost-effective, community-based technology solutions, empowering both local governments, schools, our CCAs, community groups, even places like nursing homes and water districts and individuals who don't have the means to procure this technology necessarily. But if we collectively start to finance these climate solutions, we can not only get through wildfires, but we can chip away at our greenhouse gas debt in the process. I've been really proud on the self-generation incentive program that we've got hundreds of millions of dollars moving through the Public Utilities Commission. And I think, you know, often they say the Public Utilities Commission is slow or they don't get things going quickly enough. I have tremendous trust in the Public Utilities Commission to meet the urgency of this moment. Granted, no one's perfect and we want to see more urgency. I've been a little disappointed to see that some of the utilities plans that have been authorized really do solely rely on diesel going into this wildfire season as a backup power strategy. So disheartened by that, but at the same time, we're seeing a new push for microgrids, for self-generation incentives, for other solutions that rely on clean energy technologies. And so I'm more hopeful than ever that California can turn the corner and not just be a buyer of large-scale renewable energy to meet an RPS target, but the kind of community-based energy that's going to let us survive this era of catastrophe that we're all facing. We saw New York take it very seriously after Hurricane Sandy and find energy resiliency solutions to get them through their next epidemic or disaster. But here we need California-based solutions in our communities. And I think if we build from the community up, working with you all and working with the leadership we've seen at the PUC, our Office of Emergency Services, who has to deal with both a pandemic and a climate crisis at the same time, not to mention all the other things they deal with. We have tremendous people working in the state of California's government, and I have huge faith in them that we're not just going to take the easy way out. We're not just going to default to diesel generators going into, you know, low-income people who can't afford it, stranding these assets in their garages or polluting their kitchens even, trying to keep the refrigerator on, but deploy some distributed solutions that we can all rely on and get that moving right now. So to conclude, you know, we have not been able to get all our legislation through this year. And unfortunately, the Senate's Public Safety Power Shutoff Clean Energy Package was held in Assembly Energy and Utilities Committee. But that doesn't soften our resolve in any way to advance these solutions right now. I think the Public Utilities Commission and the Office of Emergency Services have budget authority and regulatory authority to really lead the way. And it's only with partnership from folks like you all, and hopefully with the support of the legislature, that we can turn the corner here and embrace a resilient, clean, abundant, and affordable future for all Californians, and then scale that future to help put this country on track to actually survive the next decade. Thank you all, and take good care.
Oh, well, how wonderful to hear those words from Senator Stern. I'm so glad that he could take some time to join us on the call today with pre-recorded remarks. So where we're going to do, we have about 4 or 5 minutes for questions. So I'd like for my fellow panelists, Commissioner Shiroma, I see you there, and Eric, please turn your screen back on, and also we'll welcome back Mayor Pro Tem Carmen Ramirez as well. What I would like to do, because we only have about 5 minutes, is maybe read through a couple questions, and then we can provide maybe some short answers and think about how to provide more detailed answers if warranted in follow-up. So let me turn to Amanda and Mona, who I think are going to read some questions for us.
Hi, this is Mona. I've just been scanning some of the questions that are coming in, and one question came from Wenwick Page about jobs. And so this is something that was raised in Mayor Pro Tem Ramirez's remarks. It's something of top of mind with the economy slowing down. So basically, I guess the question would be to our speakers is how are your agencies considering or factoring in job creation, transitioning to our clean energy economy?
I'll say something. I hope the dog doesn't start barking. I think we should look at things like the Clean Power Alliance is doing in terms of what our visioning for the projects we want to invest in, develop, and provide energy. And we're looking for good jobs that don't do, places that don't hurt the environment, and give community benefits, apprenticeships, etc. That kind of thing. Clean Power Alliance.
The Energy Commission is also looking at the investments that we make to try and ensure that there is some job training that goes along with that. So we often work with the local community colleges. And also we're always looking at the number of jobs that go along with the investments that we're making. I don't know if Commissioner Shiroma or Eric would like to add anything.
Sure. Similarly, and one of the things we did as soon as the stay-at-home orders happened and the pandemic, for our low-income weatherization program, it's called ESA, and that is where there is free weatherization, appliances, and what have you, both for electricity and gas. And what we did was we adopted a decision. Again, this is just near-term triage, but we adopted a decision that provided for the investor-owned utilities to advance 60 days of wages for the ESA workers while the stay-at-home was ordered. And then they became essential workers and a program to go back to work. Also in our energy efficiency program, we do foresee that the essential need for energy workers, near-term and long-term, and also we are keenly aware that as there is the decarbonization, electrification, what have you, that there are a lot of workers who are working on the distribution systems, transmission systems for gas, and the need to provide for a continuity of jobs. Thank you.
Thank you. Mona, I think we have time only for one more question. Our panel went by so quickly, but yes, if you will ask one more question, maybe, I don't know if there's upvoting or you've seen a theme in the questions to pick the last one there, please.
So a lot of people are asking about programs that are available to low-income residents, and I think there's a distinction that needs to be made between renters and then people who own their homes or properties. So there'd be a difference between, solar installation, energy storage. I guess if there's availability to answer what agencies are doing to make distinctions and have programs available to different communities depending on their ownership status of their residences.
So I can speak briefly to that with an energy commission example. One of the things we worked on is called advanced energy communities. And that's what we were looking at. It's more a way to make your entire community zero net energy versus kind of each home or each set of buildings zero net energy. How does the community work together to become zero net energy? And communities have come up with a bunch of different ways to try that out. And I would be happy to send a link to our page, our website that talks about the advanced energy communities if that has piqued folks' interest and they'd like to learn a little bit more about it, since I know we're short on time. Let me see if any of the other panelists would like to weigh in.
Just very quickly,
Mayor Ramirez.
I'd like to say that many of our low-income folks live in multifamily units, apartments, et cetera, and you have to incentivize the owners of that property to provide that and give some benefit back to the renters there. And of course, we are very nervous about potential eviction waves because of the moratorium ending. So it's a big concern. Thank you.
And at the CPUC, there is a focus on multifamily and what percentage of the residents are in the low income category or not to qualify for these weatherization investments.
Okay, well, our panel went by so quickly. It's something I think we could have spent all day talking about versus just an hour, but I really appreciate the excellent information that you all brought. Commissioner Shiroma and Mayor Pro Tem Ramirez and Eric, thank you guys so much for being part of the panel this morning. And I will turn it back over to Doron to let us know what to do next.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you so much to everybody. Thank you to Carmen and all of the members of that panel. We really appreciate what you guys brought to the table. We're just going to take a moment here, like 1 minute for our virtual break. So if you need to get up and dance or refill your coffee or use the restroom, this would be a good time to do that. We're going to start again right at 10:15. This would be a good time if you're staying at your computer to take a look at Climate Safe California. Barry just redropped that a link into the chat. And I'm happy to report we put a challenge out at the beginning of the webinar today to get 30 more endorsements for this platform, which, by the way, has already been endorsed by Congresspeople, by various organizations, and all kinds of other citizens and organizations like yours. We already have 12 new endorsements, so thank you those of you who have already endorsed, 10 individuals, 1 business, and 1 organization. So you can endorse as an organization. We encourage you to do that, or as an individual. I would mention that we've got a lot more questions than we're able to answer. So if the panelists who are still here have an opportunity to review the Q&A, maybe you can answer some of those questions in writing. That would be wonderful. If not, we'll do our best to get to other questions in the future. I would point out lastly that there is so much to discuss that we are going to be holding another follow-up policy summit in November on the 18th. I'll talk more about that at the end. So very short break indeed. We hope you're all, getting a chance to refill your beverages and the like. But right now, I think it's time to move on to our next panel, which is our policy update. Which is our labor panel. And in order to introduce the labor panel, I'd like to introduce Mark Kyle, former Director of Government Affairs and Public Relations for Operating Engineers Local 3. Mark, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. Great panelists so far. Thank you for having us and having this particular panel. So far this morning, I've already learned a lot. And we're going to be joined by 2 fantastic speakers on this panel. I'm just going to point out that, Jennifer, you need to turn on your audio and video now so we can see you. But we are joined by Vivian Price, who worked for over a decade in steel, auto, refinery industries, and then became a union construction electrician before she ended up getting her PhD in politics. She's now a professor at California State University, Dominguez Hills, and a researcher for Labor Network for Sustainability. We're also joined by Jennifer Kropke, who's an attorney working on policy design for both IBEW, the International Brotherhood of International Workers, Local 11 down in Southern California, as well as the National Electrical Contractors Association. They're the folks who hire those union electricians, and she focuses on democratizing energy, electrification of transportation systems, and workforce development for disenfranchised populations. We're going to start this with a quick question to Vivian. Vivian, can you just give everyone your best definition of what a just transition is and what it means to organized labor?
Certainly, and thanks so much for the introduction. I'm going to share my screen. I've got some things I want people to look at while I'm talking.
Great. Can you speak up just a little bit, Vivian, please?
Certainly. So first of all, I wanted to just say, workers are not disposable. The Director of Communications for the United Mine Workers said it best, saying that we've never really had a just transition in this country for many of the industries that have been phased out. Not only coal, but also steel and auto in many ways. People lost their jobs, alcoholism and drug use rose, suicides rose. Nothing was ever done in respect to that. And that's why we need a just transition. A just transition is really a big tent idea. And I've just put a few points up here. The origins of a just transition started probably in the early 20th century, but it was really consolidated by the oil, chemical, and atomic workers talking about occupation and safety and health. Tony Massachi, who started the Labor Party with a number of other people, was also instrumental in getting OSHA passed, the Occupational Safety and Health Administration legislation. And there was the first environmental strike back in the 70s against Shell Oil. On the one hand, the objective of a just transition is to provide a hopeful and optimistic future for all workers. And this is a quote from Industrial, a global union, especially for those in industries that may be impacted by efforts to limit greenhouse gases or by the introduction of new technologies. But for example, the Climate Justice Alliance broadens that definition to talk about envisioning a world in which fairness, equity, and ecological rootedness are core values. And I'll just say more substantially, speaking also as part of the Labor Network for Sustainability, fossil fuel workers deserve support. They need job retraining, decent pensions with healthcare, job creating community economic development, and just transition should extend to a transformation of society towards equitable and just future for all. We're doing a listening project, talking to workers and union folks and communities across the country, indigenous communities as well. And most recently, in the last weekend, we heard about the shutdown of Marathon's Martinez refinery. And this is a perfect example of the importance of a just transition. There's over 740 workers who are now facing, really a future, a total uncertain future, as well as 250 to 2,500 craft workers who normally would be working at least a portion of their year in that refinery. The refinery in Gallup is also being shut down. So that gives you an idea of what we mean by a just transition.
Thank you very much, Vivian. Jennifer, can you give us some concrete examples from your perspective? I know you've done a lot of work and your local does a lot of work on energy and as well as transportation. Can you give us a little bit of perspective from Southern California?
In this dialogue is we're really seeing a change in energy.
Can you speak up just a little bit more?
Yes. Can you hear me okay? A little louder? Okay. I can go a little louder. Awesome. So part of what we're seeing right now is this interesting change in our energy, the types of energy we're buying, and where that energy comes from. And part of the conversation, the dialogue that I wanted to share in terms of this is part of what is interesting for all of us to be aware of when we talk about this concept of a just transition is our energy is changing from how we construct it to how we maintain it. And the easiest example I can give is if you think about a coal plant or natural gas, those take time to construct, and there are a lot of maintenance jobs on those. If we focus and shift towards our renewable energy, those are made in a different time frame, and the maintenance looks radically different. So part of the conversation that is important in this is, as our industries are changing, are we creating opportunities for those same types of jobs? And part of it is I kind of want to push back on this idea of a just transition, because I like that idea and that concept. But I think in practice, it's very challenging to tell someone who's been working and who is in their 50s that they may be getting retrained. I think maybe from my perspective, and I love all the work that we're doing, but a different way to think about this is we need to be creating more opportunities for these skilled trained workers that they can work in. And when we think about what types of jobs we're creating, are we creating renewable energy jobs that are paying $20 an hour, like a unorganized, non-union solar installer, or are we creating jobs that pay $55 an hour for that same person who would have done oil refining work?
Good point. Thank you. To paraphrase the Canadian journalist Naomi Klein, she basically says that in order to have a just and equitable climate transition, it can't really be done without organized labor being at the table. So I'd like to pitch it to you, Vivian, and ask if you could give us what you believe briefly, what some of the challenges facing organized labor, what those challenges might be in terms of participating and executing a just transition.
Thank you for that. And Jennifer, I totally agree. I think, you know, a lot of people don't want to be retrained. They want more work, and having a skilled job is definitely an important part of that, and on renewable energy. But we also want to make sure that we get good wages for rooftop installers too, and let's see those people get organized and get you know, really good wages. So the challenges for workers and unions, I've just put a little spread of some visuals. You know, in our society, we're seeing income inequality rise as the union membership declines, and unions have been under attack for quite a while. But now we see an unprecedented attack on workers' rights, even through the National Labor Relations Board, through 45's appointees that are just really trying to decimate the opportunities that labor has to push family-sustaining jobs. We're met with the coronavirus, the lack of prevention of, you know, of good health measures in the workplace. We're dealing with racism and sexism, and unions are also trying to deal with those issues within their ranks. We have automation and artificial intelligence that create new challenges for unions to organize. A lot of times automation is a form of digitization where people are faced with speed up, and they're, you know, really their work is quantified, and it's just like, you know, Frederick Taylor's scientific method back in the early days of the Industrial Revolution. So, you know, Labor Notes talks about organizing in a pandemic. I think that's a good place to you know, turn this over to Jennifer as well. You know, unions and workers who are not in unions are really trying to figure out new creative ways, and we see a lot of action in the workplace now, even despite the challenges that workers are facing.
Thank you. Jennifer, what do you see as some of the challenges for organized labor?
I think it's interesting that we are all talking about organized labor, and I think I want to remind all of us that labor is definitely not monolithic. There are definitely different sectors of labor that have different focuses. And I think part of that conversation has to do with how is labor evolving into this carbon-free economy that we're all trying to create for health and other reasons. So part of it is really having labor take a position of what are these new opportunities for us in this new carbon-free economy? For us, for IBEW Local 11 and LA County NECA, we've really been focused on transportation electrification. We've really been focused on community choice aggregation. And part of it is because we really want to see these new evolving areas have workforce standards. And I wanted to compliment Ms. Ramirez, who spoke a while ago, because part of our work down in LA was years ago, probably almost 4 to 5 years ago, going to those individual county board supervisors and explaining to them why community choice aggregation was a great idea and how they could evolve from just being a utility customer to really being their own utility and having their own workforce development. And part of what was great was that about that is Clean Power Alliance, which is our LA County community choice aggregator, really took a thoughtful approach to procuring their energy. They sat down with Center for Biological Diversity, Sierra Club, as well as us, and said, we're interested in hearing from you. What are the things that matter to you? And we were all able to sit down and say, hiring people who are in a state certified apprentice are important. Hiring people who are previously incarcerated is important. Making sure where your projects are sited is important. And we were able to work together collectively to come up with a new way of buying energy and really focusing on who is buying the energy, to what end are they buying the energy, and who is impacted by those energy procurements. And that for us in Southern California was an amazing concept. And part of it was also a dialogue of there's investor-owned utilities, and the way that they are set up is they're set up for their shareholders. And they create great jobs, by the way. This is not a knock on investor-owned utilities, but the focus and the emphasis is different. And that's part of what's exciting for me about working on these types of engagements is it really is about democratizing energy, giving people who are elected more of a say in their energy. So for us in labor, it's been about what are the new jobs coming out? How do we create a role, and how do we attach workforce standards so that people who are in these new jobs are making a decent wage?
Thank you. And being a union member of operating engineers, I'd say wage and benefits.
Correct. Actually, you know what, Mark? That's a good point that I want to just touch on really quickly, because that's a question people often ask is, if it's a public project and it's prevailing wage, why does it matter? Why should we care about this? And part of the explanation I give is because these types of projects have not only prevailing wage, but they have healthcare, they have retirement, and they are working with responsible contractors who are really putting an effort to hiring people who live in CalEnviro screen areas, hiring people who live in those local areas to the project, hiring people who were previously incarcerated, hiring people who've aged out of our juvenile dependency and delinquency systems. So I'm glad that you brought that point up. Thanks for allowing me to elaborate a little bit on it.
Sure. And those are some good examples. Vivian, maybe you could also talk about some positive examples of coalitions and work that organized labor is doing with community and other stakeholders to try to move the agenda forward on a just transition.
Sure. And I wanted to say, I agreed with the point that Marta Segura made about bridging pensions. If we're talking about older folks, I can certainly relate to that. If your workplace shuts down, we need to bridge pensions. Washington had the 1631 proposition, which was a good example of indigenous communities, communities of color, and labor coming together to try to create a plan for clean energy that would also, provide help to, a kind of a holistic program. So I'm going to put up a few links that after I finish this slide that might be of interest to people. But I wanted to just highlight a couple of points. In terms of CCAs and green jobs, we can look at the creation of family-sustaining jobs through apprenticeship programs, through union jobs that may not have apprenticeship programs, but are also people who are skilled and looking, and we think of the communication workers of America, the steel workers, as people who have many skills and are also related to the renewable energy opportunities. We also want to look at non-union jobs that are local, high road, and family sustaining that maybe could be represented by unions in the future. That includes having a neutrality commitment from non-union contractors. And many of these points come from the East Bay Clean Power Alliance. I think some of the folks from there are on this call, and I want to do a shout out to the people that helped me think about this presentation from the East Bay Clean Power Alliance. Local renewable energy production, these are all points that Jennifer's touched on in terms of what CCAs can do. Create energy efficiency retrofits, buy local, contract local, hire, and put priority on disadvantaged communities using strongly weighted factors and choosing CCA project and contract awardees. These are things that were used in the past to help bring people like me, women, and folks of color into the trades, thinking about, who is going to get the awards for these contracts. Community benefits, racial and gender disabled, formerly incarcerated, equity, and respect for indigenous lands. It's one thing to think about, creating affordable energy in, large utility settings, but we also want to be aware that we are disrupting, potentially sacred lands. And then I want to shift over to Robert Pollan, who's working on a program for a fair, sustainable recovery economy, not just from for climate change, but also from COVID. And he has 4 points that he's really pointed out, and I'll post his website as well: public health intervention, public infrastructure, clean energy investment, and high road job creation, and a just transition for all displaced workers. So there are programs out there and ideas that we can turn to. The one I just heard about last night was the Environmental Justice Solutions. And I've got their website too. They're working right now in Oakland in creating programs that really touch on all of the points that we've been talking about. Thank you.
Thanks, Vivian. Jennifer, thanks for your presentations. We have just a couple minutes left for some questions, and we've got a few questions in the pipeline here. I'm going to try to sort them from both the chat section as well as the Q&A. People drop it in the Q&A. It's a little easier. Some of them go along the lines of policy and talking about just transition and how do we move from a carbon-based economy and keep workers employed with benefits, with training, access to disadvantaged communities for those new jobs. And some are more technical that the Climate Center geeks might be able to answer better. But here's one that I'll toss to you, Jennifer, first. Would mandating carbon sequestration at power plants and refineries create jobs for just transition, or would such measures just force those facilities to shut down sooner?
I think I want to know more about the specifics of the type of carbon sequestration that we're talking about before we talk about carbon sequestration creating more jobs. Because if we're talking about, I think for myself and for some, I don't want to speak for everyone in labor, obviously, because we have very different voices, but I think the idea is we want to be going towards more renewable energy generation and creating good jobs in renewable energy generation and making sure that there are standards for all of that renewable energy, but as well also thinking about how we do this in terms of what is the cost for energy versus what is the value for energy. And those cost propositions versus value propositions can be very different depending on who the buyers are. There was a question earlier about, how can there be the thought or the way to make sure about the price for solar when there are power purchase agreements that are entered into with community choice aggregators. And part of the thought was that's part of the reason why Clean Power Alliance has done such great work in this regard. They have a multifaceted approach that isn't just the dollar. It takes into consideration several different factors, and they weigh all of those factors, and the totality of those factors is how they make their decision, as opposed to just straight cost. So I don't know that having more conversations about carbon sequestration are helpful, especially in our state in California, where so many of our people and the electeds who represent those people have very clearly indicated that they want to get to a carbon-free economy, and they want to see more renewable energy. And they've put into place community choice aggregators that have, in my opinion, collectively raised the RPS by the IOUs by they themselves procuring larger amounts of renewables within their portfolios.
Good. As with all questions, we could go back and forth on a number of these points, but I'm going to move on to another question and toss it to you, Vivian. Labor unions for gas and oil operations do not support transition to clean energy. That's a pretty broad statement. They actively fight state rules that implement restrictions on oil and gas operations. Could you comment on a successful strategy for us? Vivian?
Yes. Well, thank you for that question. And I'm just going to say, I agree about carbon sequestration. It's been funded in many places around the world, and only for dismal failure. It's very expensive, and it does extend the life of fossil fuel as opposed to shifting to renewable, and adds in a lot of cost to the energy that it produces. But yes, as far as for example, the steel workers who represent refinery workers, we've been talking for years now about what's the future. This is why just transition is so important. And I use the word because we don't have a better word to use. What are the pathways for workers who've had an opportunity, Black and brown workers as well as white workers, indigenous workers, women workers who are working in refineries and oil drilling? Where do they go? How do we provide other opportunities for them to use their skills or to create higher value jobs? I mean, we should see that healthcare should be paid better, and then maintenance and healthcare could be an opportunity for skilled workers to move into that avenue, for example. But without an idea of where you go from the high-paid refineries, it's very hard to get buy-in from either the building trades or steel workers, refinery workers. And I would say that in both cases, building trades and steel workers, for example, have supported the clean energy legislation. For example, USW 675 is promoting 345, Bill 345, which is to create distance from residences from oil drilling. So there are ways that people have really felt they have to embrace not only good jobs, but also clean communities, because people who work in many of these facilities also live in communities near them and have the same interests as people who are fighting for cleaner air.
Thank you.
And one other thing, high road job creation is, high paying jobs rather than low road, which is low paying jobs, no benefits, things like that.
Thank you. I'd like to thank both of our panelists for their time today. and for all the interesting questions that we were not able to answer. And I'm going to turn it back over to you, Doran. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
I'm going to turn it back over to somebody.
Yes, thank you all. Yes, I'm back. Thank you, Mark, for an excellent job moderating. I really enjoyed the conversational style that you created. And Vivian and Jennifer, thank you so much for your excellent work, as well as being with us here today to share it with us all. I did just want to mention when you guys do the Q&A, we're going to move to the panel here in a moment. But when you do the Q&A, please put those questions in the Q&A. It's easier for us to monitor than if you drop them in chat. You can use the chat feature to give us links to things you think are interesting, other things you want all participants to see. So we encourage you to do that, as well as if you'd like to introduce yourself or leave your contact information for the other attendees, you can drop that in the chat feature too. It might be a nice way to see who's here. I've noticed there's been some private conversations going on in chat, and I encourage that kind of networking. That's part of what we miss about the real world, and one of the things we're trying to recreate the best we can using the technology available to us. So thanks again to that wonderful panel on labor. I'm now going to turn to the critical question of environmental justice. And to lead the discussion, I'd like to introduce my colleague here at the Climate Center and also a local leader in the Sunrise Movement, Janea Turner. Nina, are you with us? And are you ready to take over the floor?
Yes, let's do it.
All right, take it away.
Okay, as just introduced, hi, my name is Janea Turner. I am the Energy Programs Coordinator here for the Climate Center. I'm also an organizer with the Sunrise Movement here in Sonoma County. And if you're not familiar with us, the Sunrise Movement is a youth-led organization, and we're fighting for a just transition of labor. And that doesn't only just mean securing good paying clean energy jobs for fossil fuel workers, but that also ensures good paying clean energy jobs for people in our frontline communities as well. We're fighting for our right to breathe clean air, to drink clean water, and we're fighting for our right for a livable future. We've only been around as a movement since 2017, but environmental justice organizations have been fighting for the exact same goals, and if not more, for decades, for our frontline communities, which are predominantly comprised of people of color and which disproportionately experience the severe and fatal effects of the climate crisis due to corporate fossil fuel greed. The battle for energy equity has been going on for so long, but we still haven't reached the point where everyone has the right advantage to take advantage of clean energy programs. So in a time where breathing polluted air has even worse effects due to the COVID pandemic, clean energy resilience is so important and so needed in all of our communities, and policies and legislation to make that possible is crucial. So to discuss this, clean energy resilience and environmental justice, we have a panel of three amazing women. We have Mary Rose Taruc, coordinator for Claim Our Power Utility Justice Campaign, Gabriela Orantes, Just Recovery Fellow at the North Bay Organizing Project, and Nayamin Martinez, Executive Director of Central California Environmental Justice Network. So Nayamin, if you are ready, you have about 8 minutes to present.
I am. Let me share my screen. Okay, so good morning, everyone. Buenos dias. My name is Nayamin Martinez, and it's a pleasure for me to be here learning a lot from all of you and also sharing our perspective of what do we see in environmental justice communities. And in particular, I'm going to focus in a region, the Central Valley, or as it's also known, the San Joaquin Valley. It comprises 8 counties in the southern part from Kern all the way to San Joaquin counties. So what I would share with you is what our organization, the Central California Environmental Justice Network is doing, and also some of the examples of the challenges that we have seen environmental justice communities face in regards to access to clean energy sources. So before I will start just by saying that CCJN was formed in 2000, and really our goal was, or our vision is to end environmental racism that is so prevalent in our region. and we could help these communities achieve economic justice and health equity. And this is all in line with what has been discussed in the entire morning, which is just transition. Why? Because many of our communities not only are affected by these sectors that are polluting our communities, but are also employed by them. And these practices that are not sustainable and are making our communities sick and our environment dirty. So I don't want to assume that everybody has understanding and knowledge of environmental justice. I know that for people who are not in this movement, it might be like a weird term. So I thought it was safe to start with an official definition. This comes out of the Environmental Protection Agency. So they consider environmental justice as the fair treatment and meaningful involvement of all people, regardless of race, color, national origin, or income, with respect to development, implementation, and enforcement of environmental laws, regulations, and policies. And as you would see in the next image here, that's not a reality in many parts of California. So this is a map. Many of you might be familiar with it already, but if not, this is a screenshot of CalEnviroScreen 3.0. CalEnviroScreen is a program or a map that is created by the office OEHA, that is under the California Environmental Protection Agency. What it does, it combines all the data from different agencies, data from burden of pollution, but also data of social vulnerability. For example, income levels, asthma rates, and all those kinds of things. And they put this index together. So the parts in the map that you see here, which are Central Valley or the San Joaquin Valley that are in red or orange or darker yellow, those are the communities that are considered more disadvantaged because they have more burden of pollution and also because they have higher social vulnerability. So what is making our Central Valley, polluted or so disadvantaged? First and foremost, the things that are used in the main economic activities or industries of our region, pesticides and fertilizers being one of them, but also oil and gas. Kern County is in Kern County, 85% of the oil extraction in California is where it happens. We also have dairies, we have waste disposal facilities. Indeed, the 3 hazardous facilities that the state has are located in the Central Valley. We have biomass, which is supposedly a clean energy source, and we are always arguing if that's the case, because we're burning to produce energy, and anything that burns is polluting the air. So as you could see, the list is long, and definitely I could be here for 3 hours, so I'm gonna skip this. Just to start with an example, what are the challenges that communities where I work and live are facing in terms of energy, clean energy? Well, this is a map, and I'm sorry, it was super hard to get a map because this is an unincorporated community. It's called Tombstone Territory. So if you Google it, you're not gonna find it because it's so tiny and it's just a community located outside of the city of Sanger in Fresno County. Why I'm giving you this example? Because I hope it was only one tombstone, but tombstone for today, I'm using it as an example of all the multiple unincorporated communities that we have in the valley that live conditions very similar. So Tombstone Territory has 57 households. The median income is a little bit over 27,000. Sorry, there was a typo there. Well, these homes are still using propane gas for their needs. They have private wells with contaminated water that they cannot drink, of course, and then they use swamp coolers instead of AC units to cool down their homes. So what's the problem with all that? So here, as you could see that triangle, that the red zone, that's Tombstone Territory. On the inferior side of that, almost a triangle, that is called Central Avenue. Central Avenue, on the other side of the road, there's already a line of natural gas that could be easily connected to the community. Yet, for years, the community has been ignored. Why? Because most of them, 90% are Latinos, and as you can see, are low income, so nobody's paying attention to them. Actually, hardly anyone knew where Tombstone Territory is is located until last year when Governor Newsom came to this community, one house in this community, to sign that safe and affordable drinking water. So as I said, I hope it was just tombstone, but the reality is that many houses here in our Central Valley still, don't even have natural gas. They have propane gas. They pay a significant amount of their limited income in this type of energy. And as I said before, they use swamp coolers. It's a very inefficient way to cool down your house, not to mention that it puts people who are using these devices to an increased risk of air pollution. And I will move to the other challenges. So another challenge that we have here in our valley is during the summer months. We have almost every single day between June and end of September, and now is up to mid-October, we have weather of 100 degrees and above, sometimes even 110. So it's not a luxury, it's a necessity to have a way to cool your house. And so the bills that these families are paying just to use swamp coolers or the ACs are incredible high for their low income, the low income that they have. And then, in terms of really, as I was saying, the swamp coolers also bring all the air pollution inside the house. So if you don't know, the San Joaquin Valley is known as having the worst air quality in the entire nation. So that's another way in which these communities are affected by using these particular devices to cool their homes. In terms of access to clean energy, in the years where the drought was hitting us the hardest, some farms that did not have water to irrigate their crops anymore switched to leasing their properties for solar farms. Yet, the communities that are surrounding those farms have no access to that energy, which is another example of being forgotten. And then in terms of accessing programs to get solar panels for their own homes, yes, there's so many companies, so many programs. Unfortunately, what we have seen, and this is the picture I put here, is the scams all over the place, to the point that our Assembly member Joaquin Arambula had to intervene and do public forums and all kinds of efforts to try to educate more of our community, because especially Spanish speakers were taken advantage of, and all of a sudden they had their properties with a lien because unscrupulous companies were taking advantage of them and selling them these solars for ridiculous amounts. And I'm almost at time, so I will just say that the other challenge that we have is that we don't have choices. We don't have a community choice. I think in Stockton they're working on it, but the entire valley, we don't have that. We just have the two large utility companies, PG&E and Southern California Edison. And while these companies supposedly are offering some sort of programs for families that, especially during the pandemic right now, are suffering and cannot pay their bills, the access of how to access those programs, the information is very limited. It's not available in many languages that are spoken in our valley, like Spanish, of course, but indigenous languages, Southeast Asian languages. So these communities are really falling through the cracks in this crisis moment. And of course, the last one that I'm going to mention is inadequate resources to build our resiliency during climate change. And one example is, if we were to have power outage, we would need to rely on generators, right? But what is the problem with many or most of the generators that are offer or propose as solutions? These generators are polluting the air even more. And as I said, the Central Valley has a worse air quality in the nation. So that definitely is not a solution for us. So we would like to be part of clean energy solutions, and we would like to be part of clean jobs. And we hope that I could connect with many of the organizations that are presenting here today, because that's what we would like to see here in our valley. So thank you.
Thank you, Nayamin, that was great. All right, next we have Gabriela. If you're ready to present, you've got about 8 minutes.
Great, thank you. Thank you for having me. My name is Gabriela Orantes, Gabby for short. She, her, pronouns, and I am the Just Recovery Fellow at the North Bay Organizing Project. I am the daughter of immigrants. I was brought to California when I was a year old from El Salvador, and I must honor my family's experience as immigrants, our language barriers, immigration barriers, cultural difference barriers, because they greatly inform how I do the work in community and my role as a Just Recovery Fellow at the North Bay Organizing Project. NBOP is a grassroots, multiracial, and multi-issue organization. We are comprised of individuals and 21 faith, environmental, labor, student, and community-based organizations in Sonoma County. We are a regional power organization rooted in working class and minority communities here in Sonoma County. Our mission is to unite people to build leadership and grassroots power for social, economic, racial, and environmental justice. We work actively to develop leaders and win policies that constitute real changes to benefit people's lives, dismantle racism, demand rights, and create a just transition. For years, through our base building and community organizing work, NBOP has built the infrastructure to respond to the effects of disasters that have struck Sonoma County in the last 2.5 years since 2017. The corresponding responses by government and civil society continue to shed light on deep inequalities in our community. Environmental events are not inherently unjust. Rather, vulnerability to the effects of disaster are informed by gender, ethnicity, language, socioeconomic status, special needs, age, housing tenure, and most importantly, the ways in which government, philanthropy, and civil society respond to these vulnerabilities. With that, I just have to say, our communities aren't inherently vulnerable. And that is why we do the work we do, because we need to call out the systemic policies and structures that keep our communities in vulnerable states. To date, disaster response and recovery efforts in our community have systematically excluded the most vulnerable among us. Non-English speakers, renters, and undocumented individuals have all reported significant gaps in disaster resources. NBOP's commitment and pursuit for a just recovery is to ensure that those closest to the pain are part of the solution. Our experience responding to 2 fires, power shutoffs, floods, and now a pandemic have consistently shown us who is left behind and by whom. It is for this reason that we serve on the leadership team of the Reclaim Our Power campaign, because we know that our communities, our frontline communities, have the expertise to call out what is broken and be a part of the solutions. And I know my fellow panelist, Mary Rose, is gonna expand a little more about the Reclaim Our Power campaign, but this is a way that we are building off of our base building, our organizing and community to bring it to a coalition effort that is fighting for a new vision for power and energy distribution in our communities, because what we've got has killed community members, has kept us having to respond to disasters, and this is unacceptable. And with that, I will close my part, but excited for the Q&A and to hear Mary Rose.
Thank you, Gabriela, that was great. Next up, we have Mary Rose, and again, you've got about 8 minutes to present.
Wonderful. Magandang umaga. Good morning, everybody. Mary Rose Taruc. I'm calling in from Ohlone Territory, also known as Oakland. I have slides to share, so let me make sure that that comes up. All right, so I am honored to be on this panel with beautiful, powerful, all women of color on this panel. Such an honor to be able to share the mic with you all and to share with the audience here at the summit the experiences and the solutions that we have from low-income communities of color, and that we are not inherently vulnerable, as Gabriela mentioned. We are strong, and there are a lot of institutional systems that are working against us, including institutionalized racism that our friends in the Black Lives Matter movement are calling to the fore for us to reckon with at this time that's been a long time coming. I want to honor the environmental justice leaders who have taught me, who come from the civil rights movement, the American Indian movement, the Brown Berets, the Asian Serve the People movements that contributed to who formed the environmental justice movement. And I also want to say that it's easier for us to say environmental justice instead of what it really is trying to address, which is environmental racism. So I'm going to talk about racism today, and maybe you might get uncomfortable with some things that I say, but I think it is important, and it's so timely that we're having this conversation around racism and the energy field and the programs that we are seeing in the energy field. So I am the coordinator for the Reclaim Our Power Utility Justice campaign. We are a vibrant movement that was only launched in early the year this year, so 6 months ago. And I also have experience coordinating some of the largest environmental and climate justice coalitions in the state. We have been successful in establishing environmental justice provisions in major climate and energy policy in California. We have been directing billions of dollars in climate and energy funding to disadvantaged communities, like free solar for low-income homes in the identified disadvantaged areas of the state. We have guided state agencies in defining benefits to environmental justice communities. We have this environmental justice movement that has been pushing to recognize the inequalities and the injustices and the racism that happens, yes, even within California, and that we are putting forth policies that are remedying that or solving those kinds of institutional problems. The Reclaim Our Power Utility Justice campaign was born out of the 2018 fires. In fact, it was protests at the CPUC that birthed this organization, this coalition. We are led, the current campaign is led by the biggest environmental justice organizations in Northern California, with 75 groups endorsing our coalition. We don't want to be burned down, smoked out, shut off, poisoned, or bankrupted by PG&E. We are campaigning to oppose the billion-dollar bailouts of this private corporation. We want to democratize the governance of our energy system, and we want to restructure our energy system for the people that meets our needs, that meets the needs that we have as the climate crisis unfolds. And so we needed this campaign to come together to imagine something different than PG&E, because when power shutoffs happen and people who need power to live that those decisions about whether they get power or not to live is decided by a private corporation, then there's something wrong with that. And here we have the opportunity to replace the collapsing PG&E corporation and the way that they have run our state and our cities and towns to the ground with fires and shutoffs, that we can do better. And we have this campaign to help get us to that better place. We also, oh, I should mention that the Reclaim Our Power campaign was invited by both the Assembly and the Senate Energy Committees as expert witness for the SB 350 law that just passed to replace PG&E if it fails with a new a nonprofit utility called Golden State Energy. So the second part, I'm going to talk about energy resilience. So the Reclaim Our Power vision for an ideal energy system includes decentralization. So right now we have one major corporation in Northern California, PG&E, that centralizes all its power and control. And we want to decentralize that. We want community and worker control. We heard from the labor panel, it's like the workers have all these insights about what's happening and what's wrong with the system and where it can be fixed. They should be empowered, and communities who are here at, under the power lines and transmission lines, we know how to change the system. And so we want to put our energy system under the control of frontline communities and workers. And emergency management for vulnerable communities and the climate crisis need to be part of that. We want that to be democratized, and that energy resilience has to be community driven and designed for frontline communities. And as climate resiliency is defined by specific communities based on socioeconomic needs and ecological boundaries, so would energy resiliency. How a San Francisco urban community defines their energy needs will be different from a rural town that Nayamin has described, because they, whether that's Arvin out of Kern County, each of those communities have a different definition for resiliency, and that designing resilient energy systems need to be in partnership with those communities. It can't be a cookie cutter approach invented by somebody far away, and certainly not for communities of color to be saved by a white person. There's that mentality out there that you're gonna save us. We don't need saving. We could save ourselves if you partner with us. All right, here, community power and the environmental justice wins. Black, Indigenous, people of color were the ones who actually passed the AB 32 landmark climate law. Even though the authorship of that is recognizing others, the reason that passed the second time was because of folks of color and legislators of color. I'm bringing to light these things that may have been, I guess, the stories that are not told, because EJ communities have been advocating and winning solutions based on decades of insight. It is the EJ movement that developed the Cal EnviroScreen tool. So often people were like, so what does environmental justice communities mean? Where are you? How do we find you? So we had to come up with a methodology. The environmental justice movement, communities all around the state had to develop a methodology. And yes, the Cal EPA hosts that, and the Office of Environmental Health Hazard Assessment hosts this tool, but it was the EJ movement that brought it to light and the cumulative impacts that we face in our communities, not just from pesticides or fires or poisoning from dirty power plants. It's all of these things. We're poor, we're like underemployed, all of that. It comes together in this tool. And Nayamin showed you maps of Cal EnviroScreen maps, especially of the San Joaquin Valley, which is the reddest, most disadvantaged areas, alongside with LA. And then if you zoomed into the maps around the state, you'll see where within even affluent areas where the pockets of disadvantage are. Also, we codified Cal EnviroScreen into law, particularly the first time was through SB 535, that directs billions of dollars to EJ communities for climate and energy programs. We've had laws like SB 350 and SB 100 to move us further to reaching our 100% renewable portfolio standards, passed by or authored by Latino Senator De Leon, and within that directed agencies to overcome racial barriers to clean energy. So those studies are there if you're curious, and you should be curious about how to overcome barriers to getting renewable energy into communities of color and low-income communities. We also have, we've passed laws that had directed $1 billion for solar on affordable housing to give California renters access to renewables. So when I hear about SGIP programs and things like that, it means that it's homeowners, people who own their homes, and a lot of low-income people are actually renters. So how can we reap the benefits of clean energy and renewables? This was one of the ways that the EJ movement saw that could happen, is to make sure there was resources for where we were living, affordable housing buildings, commercial buildings. So here's some homework for white folks who are in the audience today. So I want to say that Black, Indigenous, people of color, BIPOC, so you should learn that term, BIPOC, are the majority of California. So, so when we're looking at the attendance maybe of this energy summit, is it representative of the majority of California, and why not? Our low-income communities of color, environmental justice communities, BIPOC, our ideas have often gotten dismissed, or that we've gotten invisibilized because of institutionalized racism. And so in this Black Lives Matter moment, we are called to face those demons. If you're a white person in the clean energy field, I suggest you do some homework recognizing your blinders when it comes to race and energy. Ask yourself questions like, is it mostly white people in the room when I develop climate and energy policy? Let me pause there. Can you ask yourself that question? When you're in the room developing climate and energy policy, is it mostly white people in the room when most of California is Black, brown, and Indigenous people? And why is that? Another question, am I partnering with low-income communities of color when I advocate for community programs? Or do I use the word community like, oh, it's all communities? Actually, as you will see, as we've talked about in the Cal Enviro screen, there are the most vulnerable and disadvantaged communities in California, and we should be putting those communities up front because of hundreds of years of institutionalized racism. That's why we have uprisings on the streets, is because we have been ignored. So how do you partner with these most vulnerable communities? Sure, let's actually put low-income Black communities up front and see how energy systems would work better to serve them. Third question, can I put the needs of Black, Indigenous, people of color communities first in designing energy solutions? So I talked about, and we've heard today, some of the programs where it's like, oh, maybe 25% of the programs are designated for disadvantaged communities. So if 25% of those programs are for disadvantaged communities, does that mean then that 75% are going to more affluent, wealthy communities? And why is that? So there's some racism for you, and you should answer those questions and think really hard about how we're going to change those institutions and the systems that are causing those inequities. Okay, I'm gonna close with a lot of these pictures are from the Reclaim Our Power campaign and the amazing, wonderful people that I get to work with in the campaign. And so for community power, the EJ movement is in California is organized, we're colorful, we're comprehensive in our presence and our approach to climate and energy solutions. And we exist in dozens of communities across California. You may have not seen us or spoken to us, but we are there, and we are actually taking over a lot of the governance of our cities and programs. You could see that, you know, there are environmental justice advisory committees and board seats and electeds that are fighting for environmental justice to address environmental racism. And so to close, I want you there in the audience, wherever you are in the summit, to support environmental justice energy campaigns. And if you cannot figure out how to support our energy campaigns, at the very least, do your racial justice homework and don't get in our way. And with that, I will turn it back to our moderator, Nina.
Thank you, Mary Rose. That was amazing. And thank you to all of our panelists today. We only have a few minutes for questions, so if we can just keep them really precise, maybe to like 30 seconds if possible, maybe we can get through a few. So one I have written down for all of you, and if you have an immediate answer, just do like a quick little hand raise and I can call on you so we can avoid the whole talking over each other situation. In terms of new energy and resiliency policy, how can we ensure that the needs and voices of frontline communities is not just heard, but taken into account when we make and write this legislation? Naomi, did you raise your hand?
Yes, I think that Mary Rose mentioned it. I think that, you know, but I would say not advisory committees, but actually putting residents at the forefront of the design of the policies. And I'll give the example of AB 617. So AB 617, by the mandate was to incorporate residents, affected residents, and they were not only listened after the policy was developed, they were at the table developing the policies, the community emission reduction programs. So that's something that should be replicated in other policy making.
I would echo Nayamin in not just creating advisory committees that are just we're tired of giving you the answers. We have the policy solutions, we have the recommendations, and to just sit on an advisory board that just doesn't do anything with it, there's an opportunity there to take these answers and actually give it practicality and move it. And like Mary Rose said at the very end, if we could get lifted in this and help us or get out of the way.
Mary Rose, you have any other, you good? Okay, cool. So we're basically at time, but I wanna pose one more question, I suppose. So obviously it seems like structural racism is the issue with why we're getting such, you know, bad air quality, why we don't have access to clean energy programs. So do you have any parting words, again, maybe like 20 to 30 seconds, to people on this call who may be potential allies that could work with your groups? Do you have any words to say to them on how to break down these barriers and how we could all work together to do so?
Look at the Reclaim Our Power proposals. We are working on how our ideal energy system could work for low-income communities of color with microgrids or energy islands. How can we get them to the communities that need it most first, get it to us first? And the California Environmental Justice Alliance often will have their policy priorities, including on energy. Look at the CEJA website for ideas about how to be allies to environmental justice folks pushing these energy solutions. There's lots of references that you could go to.
Support bills like AB 345 that is being voted right now that help us you know, mitigate immediately the effects of this fossil fuel dependency that we have, and then that help us in these just transition movements.
I would just say really quickly that in addition to what my fellow panelists have said, also look in your backyard. There are organizations maybe not focused on environmental or climate change, but they're organizing based on what is on the hearts and mind of community right then and there. The avenue of addressing renewable or clean energy might not be the specific topic. And so that's maybe why they're not going to and participating to those meetings that someone just posted in the chat. But there are things that are on the hearts and minds of folks that they are organizing around anyways. And that's a start. So I think just look in your backyard and see what's on the hearts and minds of folks as a way to integrate into these communities.
Awesome. So quick plug.
Go ahead.
The Clean Power to the People shirts are from the local Clean Energy Alliance. Look at their website. They also were the ones who started the East Bay Clean Power Alliance that led to the East Bay Community Energy CCA. And they're the sponsor of the Reclaim Our Power campaign.
Thank you. And thank you all so much. I'm going to turn it over to our MC.
Thank you, Nina. You're amazing. Thank you for being a young Black leader in this movement. Thank you.
Thank you all. Mary Rose, Nayamin, Gabriela, and Nina. I am humbled as an immigrant myself. Your story really resonated with me, Gabriela. So I'm so glad that we had the opportunity to hear from some people who could speak so clearly and passionately about the things that need to happen in order for us to move forward. We're going to take another short break. I think actually it's a good opportunity to take a pause to reflect. We heard some very powerful words and it got some really great ideas about how we can, as partners in this movement, all move forward in a way that is right and fair. And so I really urge everyone to reflect a little bit on what we just heard. We're going to take a short break here and watch a short video that Amanda's going to put up from our allies at the Last Chance Alliance. But while you're doing this, you could also think about endorsing Climate Safe California that encompasses all of this. I'm happy to report we have 24 endorsements have come in just since this webinar started, including from 6 businesses and organizations. Our goal is 30. So if 6 more of you are interested, you can take a look at that. But I'm going to turn it to Amanda to show this great little video before we go on to our last panel. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Anai.
My name is Isabel Ringa.
My name is Nayeli Kobo. And I am 12 years old. This is one of hundreds of brown fields that are contaminated by oils and are across the street from schools.
We have over 500 active oil wells in our community.
I grew up right across the street from an oil well that made me very sick. From severe nosebleeds, body spasms, heart palpitations, and asthma, I had it all. I'm committed to stop, drop, and roll. Stop new fossil fuel productions, drop existing productions, and roll out science-based setbacks.
I'm joining Last Chance Alliance because
our lives are literally at risk.
My future relies on making our last chance count.
Thank you, Amanda, and thank you for the folks at Last Chance Alliance for producing that, a really important little piece. So much to talk about. I mean, like with any of our panels, we could have talked for hours with any of these groups, but once again, and I'll give you the details, we are going to be reconvening on the 18th of November to continue this conversation. And of course, the conversation goes on at the Climate Center always. I would like to now introduce Carolyn Glanton, who will moderate our final panel on community choice energy, building clean energy resilience for low-income communities. So I'll step aside and give the last half hour or so over to Carolyn. Carolyn, take it away.
Thank you. And a quick note, which screen can you see?
We see community choice energy, building clean energy resilience, the purple slide with the words on it.
Perfect, perfect. Well, thank you, Duran. I'd like to thank the Climate Center for hosting this important conversation. I've been amazed by all the panelists and moderators that have gone before. For this panel, we will be focusing on community choice energy and how these organizations can help in building the clean energy resilience specifically for low-income customers. environmental justice presentations we just heard. I believe it's extremely important that community choice energy organizations partner with and uplift Black, Indigenous, and people of color communities and realize that there's a lot of work to be done in this area. So today I'm going to set the stage and then introduce our panelists today. We will have time for Q&A at the end, so please go ahead and continue to submit questions through the Q&A panel. As Duran mentioned, my name is Carolyn Glanton and I am Program Manager with Sonoma Clean Power. Sonoma Clean Power is one of the many community choice energy providers in California and throughout the United States. Community choice energy is sometimes referred to as community choice aggregation, or CCAs, and this allows communities to buy and build electric generation to serve our local residents, businesses, and municipalities. California has its share of disasters, as we've heard. We have floods, earthquakes, wildfires, and these disasters do put us at risk of losing power during already challenging times. We've heard about the public safety power shutoffs, also called PSPS events, which can turn off electricity in certain areas during weather conditions in order to prevent the electric system from becoming the source of an ignition. Locally in Sonoma and Mendocino County, we know why this is important. We've experienced the loss of 6,000 homes and many lost lives over the last years. And we don't want to see any more homes or lives lost. We also know that access to energy, and specifically energy that is clean, affordable, and resilient, is essential. Energy fulfills our basic human needs: heating, cooling, refrigeration, communications, such as telephone, internet, television, which is used for disasters for help and assistance. Our low-income households and communities already bear the inequities of energy burden, meaning that families have to devote a higher proportion of their income to utility bills, which leaves less to pay for other necessities. So what does this mean? Facing the prospect of a future with power shutoffs, many are turning to backup power sources, such as gas-powered generators. It is one option, but they do produce carbon emissions and can pose risks such as carbon monoxide poisoning if they are not installed correctly. Gas generators increase air and noise pollution, which can further harm low-income communities who are often already surrounded by environmental pollution due to the environmental racism in our society. Solar power backup, batteries are a cleaner power source for backup. However, these technologies are not yet affordable to everyone. This means that our low-income communities will be disproportionately impacted by power shutoffs if they are not able to afford clean, resilient energy storage. So as not-for-profit public agencies that serve their local communities, how can CCAs address this role? At Sonoma Clean Power, we are always identifying new ways to help customers coordinate with county health or fire departments and taking action to help with these PSPS events. One way that community choice energy providers have stepped into this role is to advocate for the fastest, least cost, and cleanest way to keep the lights on during this time. We can advocate for policies at the state level. We can also advocate for preferred resources, meaning what resources do we want to fulfill a backup power need during these shutoff areas? Can we advocate for solar and battery as opposed to diesel generators to power any substations in case a transmission line has to be de-energized? But a substation could still be powered to provide power locally. Importantly, I think CCAs can fill a gap that are not being addressed by other agencies through programs. So we can listen to customers on their needs and come up with innovative programs quickly that can help address these. For example, we heard earlier today that there are many great statewide programs, but there are still hurdles for low-income customers. For example, the SGIP program, Sonoma Clean Power is working to streamline access to that, including providing incentive money up front to allow that program to be more accessible. We've also heard today that many customers are renters, and so, how can CCAs address that concern as well? I would say community choice energy providers are very connected with our customers, and so we can design programs that work for them. We can also provide technical support to our communities, train our contractors for good, high-paying jobs, as well as looking into demand response as a dispatchable resource. So today we're going to hear from community choice energy groups on what is happening on the ground. So I'm really excited to introduce our panelists, which include Sage Lang from Monterey Bay Community Power, followed by Stephanie Chen from MCE Clean Energy, and JP Ross from East Bay Community Energy. So with that, I will turn it over to Sage to start her presentation.
Hi, everyone. I'm really excited to be here. I'm just going to start sharing my screen real quick. Thank you to everyone who's already spoken. It was all really inspiring, a lot of intelligent people here. I took a lot of notes, so we'll be taking those lessons learned back. So I'm Sage Lang. I'm an energy programs analyst at Monterey Bay Community Power, and I'm here to talk about MBCP and the programs that we're working on. So as she just mentioned, we're a community choice agency that purchases carbon-free power on behalf of communities in Monterey, Santa Cruz, San Benito, and San Luis Obispo. As a result of our expansion, we will be changing our name to Central Coast Community Energy in September of this year. So one of the benefits of being a CCA is that we are able to be community oriented and use our funds to create positive impacts in our community. Specifically, we aim to support our low-income customers through targeted and equitable energy programs. And as a relatively young organization, we've only been around for 2 years, we are still ramping up our response to resiliency needs in our community. So today I'll share a few of our programs that focus on these needs, as well as research that's being done to understand how best to expand our offerings. So we currently have 3 programs that tie into our goal of improving energy resiliency for low-income customers. The Uninterruptible Power Supply Program provides low-cost financing to support resiliency projects for critical facilities like hospitals, fire departments, libraries. We see supporting community resiliency as a key part of supporting our low-income community. And while the UPS program focuses on community scale resiliency, Project Sunshine allows us to directly support low-income individuals. This program launched 2 years ago and provided funding for low-income households to install solar panels. By adding state and MBCP funds, we were able to put solar panels on 20 low-income homes at no cost to the customer. This helps the customer manage their load in the short term and provides an opening for installed storage to protect against power outages in the future. Our residential resiliency program is still in development and will be really aimed at low-income customers who rely on electricity-powered medical devices. In light of the PSPS events, we've set aside $1 million to help mitigate the effects of the PSPS events on our most vulnerable customers, while also improving resiliency in our community. In order to develop this program and other programs, we've surveyed our low-income and medically vulnerable customers to better understand their needs. So I'll be sharing a few of these key findings today. Our first two questions focus on what percentage of the low-income community has backup power and where these customers live. So understanding where people live helps us understand what type of battery technology we should focus on, whether that's plug-in or installed. So out of over 400 responses, we found that 75% of customers don't have access to backup power, and a slight majority of respondents overall own their home. However, that changes dramatically when we look at only Spanish-speaking respondents. This shows a significant equity gap that's important for us to be aware of as we design these programs. We also wanted to understand their needs overall. This survey found that people were most worried about food and refrigeration, their medical equipment, their ability to cook, and their lights, communication, and overall safety. So understanding what people are most worried about in the event of an outage helps us understand their critical load, as well as what technologies would be best suited for their situation. Finally, understanding how much a low-income resident is able to pay for backup power helps us understand how to design incentives. Ideally, we would be able to provide the appropriate technology to all needy people for free, but with a limited budget, that would automatically reduce the number of people we can reach. So we need to find a happy medium where we provide free backup power to those who have the absolute highest need, and a variety of offerings that allow for us to extend our funding. So a few key takeaways from what we found so far is that there really is no one-size-fits-all program solution. And these findings are obviously high level and an aggregate of the diverse experiences and needs in our community. So where do we go from here? We continue to partner with local leaders and engage with our community directly. This data gives us a foundation for creating a suite of programs with community response that build on the ones that we currently have to meet our customers' needs. Our policy states that we should support our low-income customers via energy programs, and this data helps us understand how to create programs focused specifically on backup power to create a more resilient, equitable, and sustainable Central Coast. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, Sage. I'll now turn it over to Stephanie at MCE Clean Energy to share what they're working on.
Great, thanks so much, Carolyn, and good morning, everyone. I'll start sharing my screen in just a minute. While we're getting started, my name is Stephanie Chen. I am Senior Policy Counsel for MCE. And MCE is celebrating its 10th anniversary this year in service of customers. Here we go. Ready to go. There. Is that working now? MCE is celebrating its 10th year in service of our customers with the goal of providing cleaner power at stable rates, reducing greenhouse gas emissions, and investing in programs that support our community's energy needs. MCE currently serves just over 1 million people in 34 communities across Contra Costa, Marin, Napa, and Solano counties. Now, while affordable clean power has always been MCE's priority, our focus on clean resiliency has really been substantially shaped by our customers' experiences with PSPS events in 2019. Across our 4 counties, roughly 260,000 customer accounts experienced at least one PSPS event, which translates to roughly 600,000 people impacted. More than 70,000 customer accounts experienced 3 or more events, and some of these outages lasted 2 days or more. And many of our communities were among those that were hit with what Director Lemereau from OES mentioned before, which was the back-to-back outages. And so they were out for multiple days at a time through multiple events. So in response, MCE has taken on a number of resiliency initiatives, a few of which I'll mention here today. So the first one, oh, there we go. Our energy storage program aims to deploy 15 megawatts of dispatchable, fossil-free, customer-sited storage across our 4-county service territory in the next 2 years. MCE applies for SCHIP funding on the customer's behalf and also provides additional funding of our own to make sure that those systems are no cost to our most vulnerable customers, including low-income customers and affordable housing. And this is really our effort to address the challenge that has been raised earlier about SCHIP not quite meeting the needs of customers who are on a very fixed budget. Now, in between these outages, or natural disasters, during normal grid operations, MCE is going to give these batteries a day job and control the charging and discharging of those batteries, and will pay customers for the right to do so. This allows these batteries to charge up with excess midday solar and discharge during peak hours, which reduces solar curtailment and also reduces the need to rely on fossil-fueled RA. We're particularly excited about this part of the program because of the layers of benefits that it will provide. It will allow the agency's priorities around resiliency to align with our priorities around emissions reduction using the same set of resources. And those resources also provide customers with resilient power and bill savings. So we have layers of wins all in the same set of resources. Now, the energy storage program leverages SGIP funding, so it uses the same eligibility criteria. Our priority focus in implementing the program is on customers who are eligible for the Equity Resiliency Budget, which includes low-income customers or disadvantaged community residents that live in high fire threat districts or experience 2 or more PSPS events. It also includes critical facilities in those areas that provide services to communities during outages or other emergencies. Now, one of the requirements for this program is that the batteries must be paired with existing or planned solar. And this is so that the batteries can recharge during an extended outage like a PSPS event or a natural disaster. And it also ensures that the batteries are charged up more cleanly, which is essential for the day job of those systems as clean peaking resources. MCE also received a grant from the Marin Community Foundation in support of our resiliency work. And I think that this is an important reminder that foundations are also thinking about the same challenges that we're thinking about in the policy realm. And they can be a great partner when the goals and the strategies that we're pursuing are aligned. So for this partnership, our focus is on deploying solar and storage for affordable multifamily housing and social safety net nonprofits in Marin County. This partnership also has an economic development lens and will work closely with local job training programs to ensure that residents have the opportunity to work on clean power projects in their own communities. Now, finally, as we've talked about throughout the course of this morning, we know that not all customers can install on-site storage and that the solar requirement is a particularly high bar in low-income communities. So we wanted to be able to do at least a little bit more for customers for whom permanent on-site storage won't work. So to this end, MCE has purchased 100 portable batteries for customers who have electrical medical needs in preparation for outages. And we're partnering with local centers for independent living in our 4 counties, as well as similar community health-focused organizations to help identify customers who need these batteries the most. Our goal here, in addition to ensuring that customers have power when they need it, is to help minimize the need for customers to rely on those dirty and dangerous diesel generators that have been discussed earlier in the panel as well. And with that, I will hand it back to you, Carolyn. Thank you.
Great, thanks so much, Stephanie, for sharing what MCE is working on. So now let's hear from JP Ross with East Bay Community Energy.
Good morning, I'm JP with East Bay Community Energy. Thanks for the invitation to speak today. I'll be talking about a few of the programs that East Bay Community Energy is offering. There's many similarities between the programs that CCAs are offering these days. First, a little bit of background. East Bay Community Energy is currently serving about 560,000 customers across Alameda County. It's about 6 terawatt hours of load. And in April of next year, of 2021, we'll be adding 3 more cities, Pleasanton and Newark, which are both in Alameda County, and then Tracy, which is in San Joaquin County. So we're really excited to add those 3 counties to our services next year. As we talk about resilience and the impacts of public safety power shutoffs to our communities, similar to our colleagues, we've certainly had significant impacts to our community. So we had about 50,000 accounts that were without power last year during the PSPS events. And I'll talk about a few programs today, and the first of which is our Connected Communities program. So there's a lot of talk about resilience and solar and storage and backup power, but first people have to have power. And there are many customers who, in the course of normal operations, get disconnected because they're unable to pay their utility bills. Thankfully, disconnections have been halted due to COVID, which is good. But that doesn't mean that arrearages aren't building up as customers are unable to pay their bills. And at some point, the PUC will allow PG&E to disconnect customers again. And so there'll be some upcoming challenges as we think about people just losing basic services. East Bay Community Energy has zip codes where 10 to 15% of our accounts are either disconnected, have been disconnected or are under threat of disconnection. So we need to be figuring out how to help people pay their bills through a variety of solutions. So we've been working on some projects to assist our customers in paying bills. We've built a disconnections prediction model using our data, census tract data, as well as other sources of energy usage data to try to figure out who's going to get disconnected, who's going to have trouble paying their bill, and then do interventions, reach out to those customers to help them in whatever way we can. So one key area here is talking with our customers. So we're now setting up focus groups. We'll be speaking with our customers who are either behind on their bills or have been disconnected, and talk with them about what the challenges they're facing and why they're having troubles paying their bills, and what we can do to help, whether that's some kind of an efficiency program or a care enrollment or some other mechanism. Maybe it's just people aren't clear on how to pay their bills or don't have an easy way to pay their bills. So there's a variety of things that can get in the way, and we want to figure out how to do that. We'll be doing those focus groups in English, as well as Spanish, Mandarin, and Vietnamese, to reach out to our customers who don't have English as a first language. And then we'll also be enrolling customers in the DAC green tariff and community solar green tariff programs, which are ways to reduce electricity costs for customers, as well as providing them clean energy through solar systems. So there's a variety of options that we can explore to help our most impacted communities maintain their electricity service. So that's one thing that we're working on. We are also working on some programs for solar and storage to deliver resilience to customers. So one is our critical facility program. We've been working with a Bay Area air quality air quality management district grant to identify critical facilities in our cities. We've done this with Peninsula Clean Energy, where we've identified 500 buildings across Alameda and San Mateo County that are buildings like schools and fire stations, community centers, healthcare facilities that the cities have designated as critical. And we are now building out a solar and storage pro forma and model for these facilities. And we'll be going out with a solicitation in the late summer, early fall, to help build out solar and storage on these critical facilities. And they'll really be available for all of our communities, and certainly providing services to frontline and impacted vulnerable communities in our service territory. And the last program I'll talk about is our Resilient Home program. So we've just launched this program with Sunrun. We issued a solicitation with Peninsula Clean Energy and Silicon Valley Clean Energy back in November. And the goal and the plan with the contract that we have with Sunrun is to install about 6,000 solar and storage systems across Alameda, San Mateo, and Santa Clara counties. And through this program, customers will receive a $1,000 upfront incentive to participate. And similar to the MCE program, the CCAs will be using these behind the meter batteries to reduce our peak demand, which reduces our wholesale procurement costs for both energy and resource adequacy. Customers will get a battery system that provides resilience. The homes that are eligible are both single family and multifamily and affordable housing. And so we're pursuing both of those channels. Our contract has a minimum target of 20% of the systems to be installed on low income, care, FARA, medical baseline, and homes in disadvantaged communities. And we have a much higher target than that, as we are identifying customers who can best receive the benefits of this program. So we launched that on the 30th. And so I think in our first 48 hours or so, we had over 350 early registrations, expressions of interest. And that's from some of the PR that was discussed in the media, and we're now using our account information to develop email campaigns. And of course, we're focusing on equity resilience customers as well as customers in those frontline communities. So those are a few of the programs, and I'm really excited to be part of this conversation. Thanks very much.
Great, thanks JP. I'd now like to invite backstage and Stephanie to turn on your videos, and we did get some great questions coming through. So one to start, maybe for all the panelists, let me know if you're interested in answering this. Are CCAs looking at microgrids, not just at substations, but closer to where the power will be used, such as schools, fire stations, water departments? These locations are less vulnerable to issues with the larger grid. Would anyone like to take that?
Sure, I'll take a shot. So I think we're all looking at microgrids, and the term microgrids is a pretty wide definition. So if a microgrid, from the question, is multi-buildings across streets and across utility rights of way, then that gets to be pretty complicated, and is definitely something. I know Redwood Coast has a microgrid up at their airport that they're looking at. That is a very complicated microgrid. I think from EBCE's perspective, we're looking at microgrids as fire stations, schools, community centers, and a single building installation of a solar and storage system that can provide multiple days of backup for critical loads. I would define that as a microgrid, and it's a much simpler microgrid that we can kind of grab a hold of and get installed in the next year or two in response to these PSPS events. I think the more complicated microgrid is certainly something worth evaluating, but fire season is now and will be again in a year. And a microgrid that's a more complicated microgrid might take 3 or 4 years to deploy, depending on how complicated it is. So I think that's a big definition.
Definitely. Stephanie or Sage, would you like to add to that at all?
Yeah, absolutely. Critical facilities can apply for solar and storage under our uninterruptible power supply program. So that's currently in existence for critical facilities in our territory that are looking to create their own microgrid. But as JP was saying, the idea of a multi-unit, multi-building microgrid is a complex one. But I agree. I think the CCAs are all very interested in expanding solar and storage and microgrid opportunities.
Thanks. Stephanie, any additions?
I think the only thing that I would add is that not only are these projects that span across multiple sites technically complicated, but they're also complicated from a policy perspective. And if this is something that if this is the direction in which we want our grid to evolve, we need the policy, the underlying policy that enables that to evolve as well.
Absolutely. Great. Thank you. Another question that we got is in regards to multifamily units as well. So it sounds like, all of us are kind of looking at multifamily units and renters as a difficult nut to crack. And many of the programs that you mentioned touch on them. Are there any additional insights or policies that need to be changed to create more action in this area?
Go ahead, Stephanie.
Thanks. I would say, writ large, I think California has done a pretty good job of making sure that various clean energy technologies, including solar and storage for resiliency, are making their way into affordable housing. SOMA, I think, is a great example. And it's easy to do there, right? Because we know that customers will be protected from rent increases, and we know that that those properties will remain affordable. So the people that we're really trying to benefit with those programs will continue to benefit from those programs through the life of the asset. And I think that the more challenging nut to crack that California is really working on across policy and across technology sectors is what to do about the vast majority of low-income folks who live in, what's called naturally occurring affordable housing, or affordable housing that's affordable but not protected as affordable. So there are concerns that if we go big on retrofitting these properties, all of a sudden they're a lot more valuable and the rents get raised, and the low-income tenants who brought those incentives to the property in the first place are no longer able to benefit. So I think it's a difficult challenge, but it's certainly not one that we can shy away from if we want to make progress, not only for buildings and for the global climate efforts, but really also for benefiting the low-income customers and the EJ customers that we are trying to benefit.
Absolutely. JP or Sage, any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think so. Stephanie makes a great point there. The point I would add from a policy perspective is there are some challenges with from a procurement entity perspective on some of the programs that are available. So when we issued our solicitation for the Resilient Home Program, we were expecting proxy demand response to be used as kind of the commodity that we were buying for resource adequacy. It turned out when we started talking about that mechanism with Sunrun, because of how proxy demand response is structured, that resource could only be allocated to a single meter, and that single meter would be the kind of the community meter of the low-income facility. So, you know, elevators and laundry room and kind of main community center. That meant that if we were to use proxy demand response, the system could not then provide bill savings to the low-income tenants. It could only go basically to the facility owner. So that didn't really work for us, and because we wanted to make sure that the bill savings were part of the package for low-income and multifamily housing tenants. And so, you know, we ended up going down a different route. We built a load modifying product where we are working with the CEC instead of using proxy demand response. But, you know, that is a very technical but real challenge with some of the programs that we have access to as load serving entities and procurement entities that, you know, the programs that are around don't necessarily fit with the opportunity that we have to deploy, you know, a larger solar and storage system, for example, on a low-income multifamily affordable housing that is big enough to deliver bill savings to, you know, to the tenants, as opposed to just kind of thinking about it as trying to minimize the number and maximize the scale, which is kind of how the CAISO and, you know, different regulatory bodies want to think about things. Do less of them and do them bigger. Well, that doesn't meet the need of all these distributed resources and assets that we have.
Absolutely, and I think this is part of an ongoing conversation, and obviously we'll all be working together to improve all these questions and issues that we have. So that brings us to time. I'd like to thank our panelists so much for taking the time and telling us about their programs and many questions we weren't able to get to, but we'll try our best to follow up on. And with that, I will turn it back to you, Duran.
Thank you, Carolyn, JP, Stephanie, and Sage. Thank you all so much for being a part of this conversation. And thank you, the hundreds of people who joined us here this morning for being a part of this. Thanks also to all our speakers. We heard from some incredible people today. I'm sure our heads are all buzzing with information. Thank you for your excellent questions. I'm sorry we weren't able to get to them all. We'll do our best to answer them in follow-up. I'd also like to thank Climate Center staff, especially those who you did not see here today. So I'd like to shout out to Amanda Begley, Rick Tice, Barry Vesser, Lorianne Barber, Stacy Meinzen, and Kurt Johnson, who's the mastermind behind this whole thing. Thanks to all of you who endorsed Climate Safe California this morning. I'm happy to report we met our goal. We had 31 new endorsements, including from businesses, organizations, and individuals. Please take the time, if you haven't done so yet, to take a look at that. And if you're interested in endorsing, we would welcome your endorsement. Several people have asked if we'll make the chat available. We have downloaded the chat, and we'll make that available in our follow-up materials. I'd also like to make a couple other announcements. One, I'd like to plug the California Environmental Justice Alliance's upcoming Congreso 2020, Congress 2020, taking place on 11th and 12th of this month. One of the honorees will be today's keynote speaker, Oxnard Mayor Pro Tem Carmen Ramirez. Congratulations, Carmen. And you can find out more on CALEJA, caleja.org. I'm also happy to let you know once again that we'll be hosting a follow-up webinar to this one on November 18th. So save the date for a further discussion on community energy resilience. And our next Climate Friday is on August 21st, Soil as a Climate Solution. That's at 11 a.m. You can sign up at our website at theclimatecenter.org. So we're a minute over. I want to thank you all once again. Thank you to all of our speakers and panelists. And I'll just end with the words that Carmen started us with. Remember, sí se puede. Thank you all, and we'll see you next time.